In the event of a zombie apocalypse, would the wiffle bat be a good weapon?
Hi everybody and welcome to the 8th podcast in the Battles of Kingsgrave ongoing marathon reread through Lord of the Rings by the wonderful J.R.R. Tolkien. Today we are going to finally wrap up these books by looking at the remaining chapters in Return of the King as well as the Appendices. So I guess I should warn for spoilers, this is going to go into all the works of Tolkien as well as the movies. My name is Ina007 on the forums and joining me today we have Shane.
Hello, EastTexasDirewolf on the forums.
Great to have you back, Shane. We have Amanda.
Hey, it's Amanda. Middlecyclone's on the forums.
Peter.
Peter is Shellfish on the forums.
The rock upon which this podcast is built.
That's great.
Damn Skippy. Nadia.
Hi everyone, this is Nadia.
And Whiteraven.
Hey, Whiteraven, Santa Basher on the forums.
Have you literally changed your forum name? The Westeros World Cup is getting out of hand. I feel it's bringing out the worst in me. I'm becoming really, aggressive as a manager. So, yeah, you can read all about what we're chatting about here. There are threads on the podcast of Ice and Fire forums, of whom we are an offshoot. So, I guess we can just jump straight back into the reread. It feels like we were in a really good rhythm earlier in the year, but we've had a bit of a break. But where we got to at the end of podcast 7 was the destruction of the ring, finally. And yet, there's basically a fifth of the book left. So we're going to do chapters 5 and 6 from The King Returns, and chapters 7, 8, 9 from Back to the Shire, and then the Appendices. But maybe before we get into that, just a quick word from everyone. Did you find it weird the first time you read this that there was so much left?
I was very surprised. I thought once they returned to the Shire, everything would be, okay, and there would be a happy ending. And I was really surprised that Frodo didn't get a happy ending. It was kind of really surprised me the first time.
I mean, we can get into that, can't we, about whether he sailed off to heaven so he does get a happy ending, but certainly not on Middle-earth, I think.
Well, but not in the Shire, which is his home, so...
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether you come to it from the movies or just have read the books first, what you're expecting when you're reading them.
Because, I mean, the movie got a lot of criticism, didn't it, for just being a movie that had endings and more endings and more endings, and yet they mixed out the whole scouring of the Shire.
Yeah, I don't really remember when I first read the book, but definitely this time reading it, I feel like the movie is more fatiguing than the ending, even though it's probably just 20 minutes or something, and these 3 chapters sort of went by pretty easily compared to the movie, because there's actually some interesting stuff in here, I guess.
I was going to say, I don't remember the first time I read it, but it's these endings in the book are some of my favorite parts of the book now.
Part of this is... Okay, so on to the Stew of the King, which I bagged because it's full of Faramir. Yay! It's quite a long chapter, actually, so feel free to jump in at any point with comments on the awesomeness of Faramir. Other comments will also be accepted on a case-by-case basis. In Gondor, the city is restless and the men have gone to war. Éowyn refuses to sit idle and still wishes for death in battle. She demands to see the ruler of the city and is taken to Faramir, at which point there is pity and understanding and respect at first sight, if not love. Éowyn proudly asks to go to war, but realizes that she sounds childish and finally breaks down in tears. She wishes for a room that looks east, and he invites her to walk with him in the gardens of the Houses of Healing, saying that she is beautiful and it would ease his mind to talk to her. She proudly says she doesn't wish for conversation and takes her leave. That night, Faramir learns her history from Merry and has more sympathy. Over the next 7 days, they walk and talk together, and he gives her his mother's cloak, which is in the symbolic colours and patterns of the Virgin Mary, blue with stars. So I don't know how much Tolkien was thinking of that, but, I mean, he was a papist, right?
Oh, Faramir is Jesus now. Okay.
More Boromir.
On the 7th day, they see the final malevolent dark shadow of Sauron come over the land like a wave. And Faramir says it's like a dream he often has of Numenor. And in fact, it is a dream that Tolkien and his son both had too. Apparently, this was like a recurring dream they had in the family, and because Tolkien associates himself with Faramir, he gave Faramir the dream. He kisses her, and a shadow lifts, and the eagles come with news that Sauron is defeated. Oh, it's like with that one kiss, he has defeated the ring. Maybe not. I presume no one wants to give any other comments on the sexiness of the love story.
It's like the bodice ripper version of Lord of the Rings.
It is. It's like the Disney princess version. With a kiss, she awakes from her icy cold heart.
Yeah, as the eagles were coming in, I couldn't help but think of our last episode when we were discussing what the eagles are going to sound like. Like, are they going to be like, caw, rejoice, caw? I mean, that's not very inspiring, I guess.
You see, the thing is, like, I wasn't thinking of that because I was just so wrapped up in the romance, but whatever works for you, Peter.
There was romance in there?
There's a lot of... Isn't it sweet? It's like Faramir falls in love with her, but she doesn't respond, and...
In there.
Yeah, okay. Fine, I'll go to the politics then. What I need is Imogen on this podcast to share in this girly moment of gorgeousness. Anyway.
It is sweet.
Yes, thank you. It is sweet. And, like, if this is a book where so little that sweet happens, like, when we meet Arwen and Aragon, they're already in love and troth-plighted, or whatever that means. Yeah, which I presume means they've had some rumpy-pumpy because they've known each other for 50 years by this point.
No way, she's an elf. They don't put out.
I don't know.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in chapters.
What, the sexual proclivity of elves?
Or lack thereof.
Maybe this is at the root of Shellfish's hatred of elves. That spirit.
Burned too many times.
Exactly.
He dated one for 200 years and she never put out.
Yeah, that's fair going. But this is the first time you see someone fall in love in the book, so, you know.
No, Sam fell in love with Frodo right away.
Sam is already in love with Frodo as the book opens. I think that falls into the Arwen Aragorn.
Gimli falls in love with Galadriel.
Oh, that's
More or less.
And Legolas. Legolas falls in love with the sea.
Faramir takes up his stewardship of the city, and while Éomer begs Éowyn to come to the fields of Cormallen, she stays in the houses of healing, the only person still sad. Faramir goes to her and correctly and bluntly tells her that she loves Aragorn as a young soldier looks up to his captain, and didn't go to Cormallen because he didn't ask for her, but that she should not scorn Faramir's love, because it may have started in pity but has now gone beyond that. And this melts her heart. Aww. And this, of course, is symbolised by Tolkien. By the renaming of Minas Tirith as Minas Anna, all things made for war can now soften in peacetime. And there's this lovely speech where she says, I stand in Minas Anna, tower of the sun, and behold, the shadow has departed. I will be a shield maiden no longer, nor vie with the great riders, nor take joy only in the songs of slaying. I will be a healer and love all things that grow and are not barren. So she accepts Faramir's offer of marriage and they kiss. And at that, she is released from the houses of healing, but chooses to stay there until King Éomer comes. Ah.
It's where she joined him in his hippie nature.
Who's hippie nature?
Faramir.
Faramir doesn't have hippie nature. He's just, like, not a sort of steel...
So high.
Is that what he was doing in Minas Ithil? Or Ixalan or whatever?
Right, he's growing there. They wouldn't let him do it at Minas Tirith.
Is that
that's what they were trying to burn down Osgiliath. It was just all weed.
I think we should move on because I don't like the whole like Faramir half-baked stuff. I mean, basically, just because he's not some sword-wielding, swinging, I want to just like beat people up for the sake of it guy doesn't mean he's a hippie. He
is a good warrior. She even says nobody of the mark could have bested him at arms.
There you go.
What do you think of just on this, what do you guys think about the fact that some people like really resent the fact that Éowyn becomes a healer? And they find that, like, it's, like, Tolkien taming Éowyn, and I don't feel that way. But, I don't know, it's definitely a criticism I've heard of her story arc.
I don't feel that way at all. I think she's very much like Faramir. When war is called for, she can be a soldier. But when peace is called for, she can be at peace. And, like, it's like the big speech Faramir gives, I don't love war for its own sake. So it's an evolution.
I mean, there's still war. They still fight the Haradrim and the Easterlings.
Yeah, but these are petty battles. I mean, they don't require her to go off.
She already reached the pinnacle. She killed the Witch King. Where do you go from there?
I know.
Yeah, I think I don't mind this because it's not like Faramir has tamed her. It's her own choice to become a healer, right? It's not that she's marrying him, so now she can't, be a soldier anymore. It's her choice to become a healer now that the war is over. So it doesn't really bother me. If it had been like a situation where she's only becoming a healer because she's getting married or whatever, that would certainly be kind of offensive.
Yeah, it's not like Faramir said, right, bitch, in the stirrup. Come on,
yeah, exactly. As long as it's her choice, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever she chooses for herself.
And surely feminism isn't about being compelled as a woman to be a warrior or, to go out and work for a living. Feminism is about having the equal choice to do what you need to do just as a man would. So
I completely agree.
Well, we're all in agreement, so we're just all hippies and lovely, isn't
Yeah.
it?
It just seemed worth bringing up.
So people gather in the city, and Faramir ceremoniously surrenders his office to Aragorn, who in turn gives it back to Faramir and his heirs. That's so funny. Faramir announces Aragorn's claim to the people and gives Aragorn the crown of Eanor. Am I pronouncing it right? Eanor? I don't know. He in turn gives it back to Faramir and has Frodo bring it to Gandalf, and Gandalf crown him. This all struck me as like remarkably convoluted. The banner of King Elessar is raised above the city. Yay. He sets about restoring the city and performing his kingly duties, the last of which is to rule on the case of Beregond leaving his post to rescue Faramir. So petty. He appears to banish Beregond, but in reality he makes him captain of Faramir's White Guard in Ithilien. Faramir is made a prince, and Éomer returns to Rohan with his sister to set all to right before they will return to Theoden, and Éowyn will marry Faramir. Days later, Gandalf leads Aragorn up the paths of Mount Mindoluin and shows him his realm. That's so cool. Here is your realm. Gandalf warns him that he will soon depart with all the elder kindred, but he shows Aragorn a sapling descended from Telperion, the eldest of trees. He takes it back to the citadel and plants it in the place of the withered tree, which is laid to rest in Rath Dinen. Finally, all the elves come to Minas Anor, and Aragorn marries Arwen. So, there we go. I have to say, I found the whole crowning and here is the city. No, you take the city. No, have it back. No, give it to Gandalf, kind of slightly.
When Aragorn's titles were being announced, I was actually thinking, oh my god, he has more titles than Daenerys. It's like this whole paragraph of just titles.
I like it when Aragorn and his entourage show up and they're talking about the hobbits and they're like, oh, they're princes of great fame. Like, one of them went with his esquire into the Black Country and fought with the Dark Lord all by himself and set fire to his tower. It's like, I was there and that never happened.
Yeah, I loved how at least the opening was sort of narrated by Ioreth, the kind of the healer, like telling it to his cousin or something from the countryside, or constantly being shushed.
And I also like when the elves show up and they're like, Celeborn, Lord of Lothlorien. I feel like Lord of Lothlorien should be in quotation marks, because everyone knows Galadriel's running that shit.
But to go back to Peter's point on Ioreth, I really like that too, because it's one of the few times you see someone who isn't sort of like a noble and valiant character, like their perspective. It's quite unusual, apart from the hobbits, I suppose, which is quite funny. So it's cool. How are we feeling about the whole kind of like the trial of Beregond? That always struck me as really harsh.
I don't know. I feel like Stannis would have been harsher than Aragorn was.
Yeah, and he's just become captain of the guard of the Prince of Ithilien. It's not like he's been punished very harshly.
Yeah, but to put him in the stress of it, I mean, it's a little bit kind of like, it's a little bit pedantic, I think.
That's just Aragorn's humor.
You technically break the law, right? You can at least, torture him for like a minute. It's okay.
Aragorn sort of has a history of being a hard ass too, though, right? Like when he had to lay his arms down before he went and saw King Theoden. Didn't he say, if any man touches my sword, I will kill them, or something like that?
Yeah, he said if anyone holds the sword, they die. It's, I think, the magic of the sword more than Aragorn being a hard ass.
He showed more loyalty to Beregond. Killed some people. Let's keep in mind he did kill some guards in order to. He killed that one guy to get the key and things like that. Who was who was on the same side. So like he could have actually gotten a lot worse, but it was out of loyalty to Faramir. So it's like appropriate that he's going to go with Faramir since he has loyalty to Faramir.
That's true.
Those were guards that were just told what to do by their liege. It's not like it was just somebody telling them and then they were bad guys. They were just doing what they were told.
Yeah.
Stannis would have cut off his head and thrown a coin purse over it.
Anything else on this chapter? I mean, this is, I guess, in some ways, this is the triumphal end of the novel in some ways. I mean, we have the crowning of Aragorn, the marriage to Arwen, and, the white tree replaced and flowering, so...
When they're on the mountainside, I like how Aragorn is complaining that he's only going to live for another lifetime. Like, oh, there are children being born right now that I'm only going to live as long as them. I'm only 80.
I mean, he just got to marry pretty much the most beautiful woman in the world. I'm like, oh, life is so hard. And she's finally going to put out because they're married as well.
Hopefully.
I wonder if there's divorce in Westeros for non-consummation of marriage. Not Westeros.
Westeros.
Middle-earth.
Like annulments?
Yeah. Like I married this elf and I'd been dating for 200 years and then she just did a Sansa on the wedding night and said, I'm never sleeping with you.
Never get that time back.
Yeah.
Well, he is the king, so he could do like a Henry VIII thing.
Off with the head.
Yeah.
Do you think if Aragorn had murdered Arwen the next day, that the elves would have made war against man?
Well, they're far too lethargic to do that. I mean, they're like, hey man, that's not cool.
What?
I think
I don't know.
Wolfindle and those guys would have been all over that shit.
Yeah.
Well, her brothers are right there. Hopefully they'd do something. They'd shoot them with arrows, because that's what they do. Well, it's a good thing he didn't do that.
Yeah, it really is.
This is a good time to move on to chapter 6. Over to Amanda.
Alright. Chapter 6, Many Partings. One day, Frodo asks Aragorn if he can go home to see Bilbo. Says that he's allowed to go into all the lands of the West, and Arwen offers him her place on the ships going to Elvenhome. She also gives him a necklace for when the darkness is troubling him. Some things happen. Éomer returns to get Theoden's body and tells Gimli he finds Arwen more fair than Galadriel for reasons. They obviously disagree, but whatever. Everyone rides, like Aragorn and everybody goes, with all of the Rittermark riders, and they start riding towards Edoras, and on the way, Aragorn grants the forest to Gon, bury Gon. Finally, they reach Edoras, where they bury Theoden, and Merry cries, and there's some poems that are read. Éomer is then hailed as the new king, and Éowyn and Faramir are formally engaged.
Back when Arwen gives away her spot on the ship, can they do that? I mean, obviously they can. She did, but that's strange. She's just like, oh, you can go in my place. Here, just take this with you. I don't understand how she can make that decision.
Well, there's apparently no rules about it has to be elves, because, as we'll see if you read the appendices, there'll be others besides elves that go.
Bilbo goes.
Yeah, and Sam basically wanders off into the distance, presumably onto a ship as a ex-ring bearer of some kind, so all sorts of people seem to get on the ships.
Yeah. So is that really just an empty thing? Because Sam got to go and Bilbo got to go.
I mean, I feel like Manwë would have feelings about certain people going, but ring bearers who dealt with Sauron, who was a Maiar, they'd probably have some acceptance of that.
The Númenóreans dealt with Sauron.
Also, do I still sound like a robot?
The Númenóreans dealt with Sauron and they were not accepted.
They got a special island though.
Yeah, but then they got destroyed.
Yeah, what about Gimli, though?
They did.
Why did he get to go?
Galadriel actually interceded on his part, I think is what it says in the appendices.
Yeah, he pulled up his girlfriend and got her to pull some strings.
It's cool, he's with me.
Yeah.
He was a +1.
At the little DNA test, he just gave him Galadriel's hair, so they thought he was an elf.
Oh, they had a door scanner thing.
You must be this tall to enter the Grey Haven.
He snuck underneath it.
I mean, Círdan the shipwright's pretty old. He might just not have noticed. And actually, they didn't even go there for that, because him and Legolas built their own boat.
Right, they just rowed across.
Yeah, he has a beard. That's weird.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's the only elf with a beard.
That's not canon.
That's not canon.
I don't accept it.
We're going to get into one of those classic Shellfish. I accept that you're a Nord, but you're not a Viking conversation.
I was just bringing him into line.
Pardon?
I was just bringing him into line, I mean.
But Danish hasn't. It was so funny.
It's just strange that they say he's got a beard and no other elf is mentioned as having a beard. But I think we're getting off topic.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah,
because these 8 podcasts have not been about that.
The elves are supposed to be immortal and ageless, that sort of forever young thing, but I guess Círdan is supposed to be one of the oldest ones in Middle-earth, so.
Yeah, he's the oldest one left.
Fully
Maybe
grown?
he's high testosterone.
Yeah, maybe.
But I have a question. Are elves born fully grown? Because if they don't get old, then how do they get from being a baby to an adult elf?
It would make sense why they only have so many. They wreck those vaginas on the way out. Can you imagine when Eladon and Elrohir came out oh, there's 2 of them? What the fuck?
Yeah.
But does nobody know the answer to that question?
No, I thought the elves were born out of the ground, from mud pits or something. Just pull them out.
But then what's the point of having parents? If
well, the woman lays an egg, and the male ejaculates on said egg, and then it is planted in the ground. It's
because Tolkien didn't want us thinking about anything below the waist, guys. That's why there's no explanation of, elven reproduction.
Or orc reproduction, or tree ant reproduction. But if they can reproduce with humans, there's got to be something the same. So maybe they do lay eggs.
It's true.
The male inseminates the female, then the female lays eggs, and then they grow.
In the mud.
In the mud.
Oh, dear.
I'm glad we solved this mystery.
I'm sorry I derailed the conversation again. Theoden's burial was actually very emotional. It's mentioned so many times, it was the greatest company that any king of the Mark ever had on the road. And it was kind of, he got the respect after his death. It was kind of sad.
Yeah. There's a good quote from it. It's like, when the burial was over and the weeping of women was stilled, which, sidebar, hilarious, and Theoden was left at last alone in his barrow, then folk gathered to the Golden Hall for the great feast and put away sorrow, for Theoden had lived to full years and ended in honor, no less than the greatest of his sires. Like, that whole passage is so, like, this Tolkien's love affair with the Norse mythology is so intense in the whole funeral and the crowning of Éomer.
Yeah, I love that part. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I felt like they sort of cheated a little bit in the movies, and they kind of sneaked a bit of this in with Theodred's funeral in Two Towers.
Yeah.
It was a cool scene, though.
Yeah, you definitely get a feeling by this point in the movies they were rushing so fast, and it's a shame because this is all great world-building stuff. And
I think it's because for movies, a movie has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and the whole thing with Tolkien stuff is it's like the recognition of a tale being part of a much larger tale. So someone could easily just take out the parts that they put for the movie and have that be a story, but there's so much else around it that adaptation was always going to be different.
I think the problem is they probably needed 4 films because the presumption of the movies is that what I said, that Aragorn's crowning is the end, and then everything else is rushed and squeezed in. Whereas they should have had the Scouring of the Shire and Sharky, and then sort of justified a more leisurely final movie. But I guess they didn't have faith with film viewers that they'd continue watching after The Ring was destroyed, maybe.
Oh, they just didn't have time in that 3-hour movie to add a half hour of Shire stuff.
Yeah. I would have given up a Hobbit movie to get another Lord of the Rings movie.
See, that's the thing, right? We're now spending so long attenuating The Hobbit when we had so little time for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I just went to a wedding, tonight, and a large part of my time at the wedding was spent discussing why The Hobbit needs 3 movies.
Are you for or against?
Well, I was definitely against it. They could have easily, even if they, needed, they could have done, 2 movies and edited out a lot of stuff, if they needed to go beyond, 1 movie.
I don't know, I enjoy the ride.
Yeah,
they wanted to make 4,
I'd
I'd be okay.
One, but I think the second one had a lot of, extra stuff in there, especially the tutorial stuff. Getting back.
Back to what?
All right. So after the funeral and the betrothal and some drinks and eating, they head back. They head over to Helm's Deep and then on to Isengard, where it's learned there was conflict with the orcs near Lothlorien. Around Helm's Deep, Gimli shows Legolas the beauty of the glittering caves. It's stated that, "And never before has a dwarf claimed a victory over an elf in a contest of words," said he. "Now therefore let us go to Fangorn and set the score right." So they ride on and they see the Ents fixing up Isengard and throwing down the stones, but the Tower of Orthanc is still standing tall. As they're approaching, Treebeard calls it the Tree Garth of Orthanc, which I think is a really weird term. But I guess it's Entish. Anyway, Treebeard ends up admitting that he let Saruman go, and Gandalf believes that Saruman wore Treebeard down with his voice. At that time, Gimli and Legolas part ways with the company, so Legolas can show Gimli the beauty of Fangorn Forest, and Merry and Pippin get their final drink of Ent Draught.
Does anybody think it's weird that Treebeard, tells all the elves they can go through the forest and all of them turn him down except for Legolas? You know what I mean?
It is kind of weird, but maybe they're just afraid of Hjorns.
I don't know why. I just think it's strange, because he's like, all of you can tour my forest, and they're like, no, yeah, we gotta go this way. He's like, but this way's quicker.
Yeah, I guess, Legolas is, the only wood elf there, I guess. He's not, I guess he actually isn't, since the sort of the royalty in Mirkwood aren't, but yeah, he's sort of loves the woodlands like the rest of the people of Mirkwood, and those guys, they're in Lothlorien, and they like the sort of tamed woods, I guess, and not the wild woods like Fangorn.
Treebeard seems to be very familiar with Celeborn and Galadriel, so I'm assuming that they went to Fangorn whenever, centuries ago. So they shouldn't have, at least they shouldn't have been hesitant of going into the forest.
Yeah, but maybe
Right?
there's just nothing there. Trees and more trees.
Yeah, they're like, who cares about that? I made my own trees back at home.
But if it was a shorter way, but then they needed to have all that discussion with Gandalf and everyone, so maybe they wanted to take the longer way, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're extending their vacation to forever vacation to Elvenhome, so they gotta have some chats before. And they keep riding, and they reach the Gap of Rohan, and Aragorn and his retinue part ways with the hobbits, and Aragorn makes sure to remind Pippin that he is still a man of Gondor, and he could be called from time to time. They then keep riding, there's a lot of that, and they run into Saruman and Grima. Gandalf ends up fearing that Saruman could do some sort of mischief. Saruman's very rude to them on the road. He looks like a ragged, strange-looking beggar, is the way I think Gandalf describes him. And he is just very upset and very angry and very threatening, and he's like, all of your lands are going to fall down. I'm ultimately going to win, blah, 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 blah. Merry ends up giving him some of his pipeweed, and had originally had it wrapped in something, and then after Saruman's really weird, he takes the rags back. Grima really clearly wants to leave Saruman, and they try to get him to leave Saruman, but he refuses to and believes he has nowhere to go. After that, there's a lot of walking for Aragorn, and they walk by the gates of Moria, and then eventually past the Redhorn Gate, and they just keep riding, and riding, and they see gray figures carved in stone, and then the Celeborn and Galadriel and the Lothlorien folks all leave. And Sam wishes he was going back to Lorien. After that, they reach Rivendell, and they find a sweet and somewhat senile Bilbo, who gives Frodo his book of elven stories. They celebrate Bilbo's birthday, and he also gives Merry and Pippin some very beautiful pipes. He gets confused and asks Frodo what had happened to his ring, and Frodo's like, well, we had to get rid of it, you know? We had to destroy it, and Bilbo's just not, like, totally cognizant anymore of anything, really. He gives Frodo all of his stuff, and he requests that Frodo take up his writings and work. He apparently gives Frodo the mithril shirt again, which I'm not really, and Stang, because he doesn't remember that he gave them to him already. Right before they leave, Gandalf says to Frodo that he should look for Bilbo in the woods in the fall, and that Gandalf would be with him. And that's the chapter.
I'm always amazed
no, it's cool.
Saruman's still alive and no one's bothered to kill him.
And why are they so nice to him? Just the hobbits are so nice to him. They're like, oh, I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah, I never understood that either. Why wouldn't Gandalf destroy him when he had the chance? I mean, he can tell that he's still capable of mischief, then why not just finish him?
Like Mortal Kombat.
I mean, these are like the smartest people in the world, right? Elrond and Galadriel and whatnot, they're all supposed to have the foresight, aren't they? And they couldn't tell anything? Come on.
Yeah, I think Gandalf knows that Saruman has been up to some shit in the Shire here. I mean, he's sort of setting it up as a test of sort of character for the hobbits, I think.
I think there might be something.
Hobbits proven themselves already?
But this is when they have to rely on themselves, eventually in the Scouring of the Shire. Because Gandalf, before he parts company with him eventually, he says, I think you got some trouble, but I believe you can handle it now. Maybe, and there's a lot of talk.
To let Saruman go just to test the Hobbit?
Well, there's a lot of talk through the book about people have their parts to play, like Gollum, for instance, and why no one ever kills him. Maybe, the quote-unquote wise, since Saruman still has a part to play.
But I kind of feel that the hobbits have been tested enough. They've played their part. They destroyed the motherfucking ring, so...
No, they didn't.
The fact that
Gollum destroyed the ring. They failed to destroy the ring.
So now they have to destroy Sharky to make up for it? I mean, come on, that's just...
Yeah, but it's not just the hero hobbits who are tested in the Scouring of the Shire. It's sort of the people of the Shire in general, and it's sort of the hero hobbits growing into their role as leaders there as well.
And they kind of need that because they don't have the rangers watching them anymore. They need to kind of stand up for themselves.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, because they have to deal with all those like weird wolves and stuff that are in the woods.
Wolves are your friends.
Unless you're a dragon or kraken.
Actually, even though this chapter is just walking, and I resented that in the past, I actually really enjoyed this chapter. I mean, I guess it's just because it's so light-hearted and there's not like the sort of overhanging thread or dread that's been in all the other chapters or something like that. like the exhaustion and all that, but especially like the part where they're somewhere and Gandalf and Galadriel and Elrond are sort of speaking throughout the night, and they just look like stone statues or something. And here we get the confirmation that they are using some sort of telepathy. We were wondering about that earlier when talking about, like...
The rings, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you all think is going on with Grima? Do you think it's just guilt and the feeling that he won't have anywhere to go, or do you think there's some kind of mind control magics going on now?
He's probably murdered people for Saruman. He's probably not particularly popular in the nearby region. And he's just weak. He doesn't think he could stand on his own without Saruman, because he always had some sort of... He had his backing and him in his mind for so long, when he probably doesn't think he can survive on his own anymore.
I think
Maybe.
Also he's just that classic character that you get sometimes that knows what's right and chooses wrong anyway. I mean, in a lot of great works, you have that character that's really tragic. I think he kind of represents that.
Maybe it's like a Theon thing where he doesn't know any better. He has to stay with them.
Like a Reek thing.
Yes.
Yeah, he's definitely been broken.
I think it's kind of worse, because I think with, like, Reek in the last episode of Game of Thrones doesn't even realize, in a way, the possibilities of what else there is. Like, he's just so blinkered and inward. Whereas Grima totally knows what he could have if he could summon up the courage to leave, but just can't. Utterly tragic. He breaks my heart in this chapter. I mean, I hate the guy, but no one deserves to be trailing around Sharku for the rest of their lives, do they?
Yeah. Do you think Tolkien is critiquing anything in particular with that character?
You mean like a real person? Like
not like necessarily like a real person, but...
Well, he's sort of like a Quisling in the sort of... That he's, what's it called when...
World War Z?
Z? What?
World War Z, is that Quisling? Oh, that's right, they were, you're talking about the French in World War II?
Yeah, like the collaborators.
I didn't realize Quisling was a real person up until like about a year ago. I just always thought it was a term of abuse, so ignorant. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, like a collaborator with the sort of invaders and occupiers, like he's aiding the enemy from the inside. So I guess he could represent that if Tolkien had some sort of bone to pick with that. Maybe.
I mean, it's almost worse than being an attacker, isn't it? Subverting from the inside. It's just so treacherous.
Because he was Rohirrim, right? That's where he's from, Rohan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's clear in the movies anyway, because he looks so different.
Yeah, he's not blonde.
I know, they made him really creepy to the point that, like, why would anyone ever have trusted this person? He looks kind of like Andy Serkis.
The actor actually had to shave his eyebrows. Then they had to do reshoots, and he was like, fuck! Yeah, but actually, kind of prefer the scene in the extended edition of the Return of the King, where it's actually Theoden who is sort of trying to turn Grima back because they have a history, and I like Theoden as a character, and it's sort of like that sort of, I guess, kind of like a, he seems like a father figure to Grima in some way, sort of like, he shows that sort of real concern, like, for Grima to come down, and he doesn't. Here it's just...
Theoden, I was going to say, Theoden was always a lot cooler to me in the movie than the books. In the books, he never really, I don't know, I never really thought he was that cool, but the actor in the movies, I thought, really brought him to life for me, so I agree.
Was this the chapter where they stay in Rivendell for like a month or something?
Yeah, I kind of made it shorter than it actually is. They're there for a while.
Just like the movies.
Yeah. Also, Aragorn has a Palantir. I think Bina wrote this down, but he decides to keep the Palantir of Orthanc.
Aren't all the rest of them lost?
Yeah, except for the one in Farador.
Yeah.
Which is tainted.
What about the one with Denethor? Was that
That just it's still there, but it just shows like ash or something like that whenever you look into it.
Well, it shows it's like scorched hands on it, Denethor's burnt hands.
Yeah,
so,
that's not my nightmare fuel. I don't know what it is.
So can Aragorn still use the one he has for anything?
Yeah.
They don't just see each other.
Aren't they supposed to be communicating stones? I mean, they communicate with each other, right?
They can communicate with each other, but they can also see other things. That's how Denethor saw things further out than what he could see with his eyes. That's how he knew things.
Here's the quote from the chapter. Aragorn says, "But the Palantir of Orthanc the king will keep, to see what is passing in his realm, and what his servants are doing." So he's like the all-seeing eye, just looking up what everyone is doing.
Traded one all-seeing eye for another.
But I guess the idea that he may be sort of ribbing this, like, in that classic Aragorn humor style. Better stay faithful to the Tower Guard, or I'm gonna see what you're doing all the time.
Yeah,
Do
definitely.
it in the shower.
They don't have showers.
Yeah.
They have baths and awesome bath songs.
On to the next chapter?
Next chapter?
Sure.
So this is Homeward Bound. So finally we're back to the Shire.
The hobbits head for home. Frodo's acting strange. He feels pain from his shoulder where he was stabbed on Weathertop. And Gandalf tells him, that shit's probably never going to heal. Sorry about that. And he's feeling it. It's like exactly a year from when it happened. After that day, the pain kind of goes away, and he stops acting weird, which kind of leads me to a question. Is this pain, do you think, like kind of subconscious? Like when he thinks about it, it hurts? And he happened to be thinking about it because it was a year ago that day? Or do you think it's just something that happens a year from that day? I don't really understand that.
I feel like Frodo has PTSD to a certain extent, so maybe it's just like being near where he was when he was brutally attacked. That, or it just might be the nature of like evil wounds. Because it wasn't like he was stabbed with a normal sword. He was stabbed with like a Morgul knife wielded by them while he was actively wearing the ring.
And it continues for the next couple of years to happen on the anniversaries of his wounds. The Morgul blade and the stab by Shelob.
But it happens on like the same day as it happened, which seems strange. It's like, is that like a magical thing, or is that just like he's thinking about it that day, so it happens to hurt him more or something like that?
I assumed it was magical.
I agree with
All right.
you.
Magical.
Do we actually hear anything about, like, Eowyn or Merry or Faramir having similar symptoms?
Not that I know of.
Like, they had the black breath on them as well, but I guess they weren't stabbed, so... And Frodo does get the sort of achy feeling on the anniversary of getting stabbed by Shelob too, so...
And Keely isn't going to live long enough for us to find out, so... That was movie humor. Okay. Alright, so then they leisurely rode for many days, but when they came to Weathertop, Frodo asked them to hasten, because he could feel, like, a shadow upon him, and he, like, just hunkered down and rode faster when they went by the shadow of that, and then the wind changed and everything was all better. Then they came to Bree, where they were barraged by bad news from Butterbur, and he tells them that there were bandits all around, and things are not good in the Shire, and they aren't even exporting pipeweed anymore. Pippin's like, what, no pipeweed? So they also said, we had no trouble on the roads, and Butterbur's like, because you have swords and armor, and none of us do. And then they realized, oh, that's why people were looking at us funny. I thought it was just because we came back. I wanted to point out that Gandalf does have Glamdring here, because I remember we were wondering whether or not he took it with him, like, wherever he went, and then he ended up coming back, so he still has the sword. However that
I guess
works.
it was with him at the mountaintop then.
Right. So,
But I guess he got a new body there, so I guess it was laying in the snow and he picked it up or something.
Must be. That's what I was saying. He does have it here, so somehow he kept the sword. Butterbur says it's been bad since the Rangers disappeared, and how he doesn't realize how much they actually did for them. Gandalf tells him there's a king again, and he's probably going to clean up the roads and get rid of all the bandits and ruffians and other evil types. And Butterbur's like, oh, a king, that's interesting. And the hobbits are like, oh, yeah, and he really likes your beer here. And he's like, well, who's this guy? And Sam's like, how could you not know that the king is Aragorn or Strider? And all the hobbits are like aghast that he doesn't know, even though they traveled with him for almost a year and had no clue he was the king until someone told them. The hobbits being jerks. I don't know how Butterbur was.
So obvious.
Yeah. He's like, you mean that old dirty guy that used to sit in the corner here that I didn't really trust?
I didn't know.
Yeah, that's the one.
I didn't know Thorongil was Aragorn for like the first 2 times I read the appendices, though.
Mary teases him about forgetting the letter, and Butterbur's like, oh, wait, I do have something for you. Bill, your pony, he came back. Sam's like, my pony! And he went running out to find him. In the common room, they get this large group of people, and they're answering all the questions, and someone hollers for a song, and then that person was frowned down on account of Frodo's last performance where he magically disappeared, and nobody wanted that again. So they left Bree, headed towards the Shire with Bill in tow, and Frodo wonders what's up in the Shire, and Sam tells him what he saw in the mirror of Galadriel and how it was not good. And Gandalf suggests, it might be Saruman. And then he says, but I'm not going to help you with that, because I plan on leaving you alone to defend yourselves while I shoot the shit with Tom Bombadil for a while. You should be fine.
I mean, what's new?
Now that I have no further plans for you, I'm no longer worried about what happens to you. I'm retired. So you'll be fine on your own. This is what you've been trained for. Now, I didn't really see any training going on. They kind of just tagged along behind armies, so I don't really know how he gets that. And then Gandalf dramatically rides off into the woods, and that's pretty much the end of the chapter.
Yeah, but if the hobbits had really got in trouble, Gandalf would have helped them out, right? He would have, rode back at 3 a.m. or the morning at the greatest hour of need and sorted them out.
Maybe after.
I don't know.
I think Gandalf has pretty much left them on their own at this point.
Like I said, he doesn't need him anymore. He did his one thing, and he's done.
He said Middle Earth.
My job was to be the enemy of Sauron, was to bring him down, and that's done. And this age is, I have no part in the doings of this age. He makes it very, very clear. So he's not coming back. I don't think he is.
So if you came out of Tom Bombadil's house after talking to him for a month or something, and he saw a huge column of smoke coming from the Shire, everything's been burned down, the Shire is gone, is he just gonna be we go to the Grey Havens?
Yeah, probably he's gonna shrug and go, that's Aragorn's problem. Gotta go.
Yeah.
That's what he implied. He said Middle Earth can kiss my ass. I saved it, I'm done.
Direct quote.
Direct.
Middle Earth can kiss my ass.
I'm not entirely sure where we go from there.
I don't know, it just gave me an image of Gandalf on a yacht, being like, peace, going to Elvenhome.
I just picture him riding away on his horse, flipping him off. Yeah, good luck, guys. All right, I gotta go.
Yeah.
I wonder if when he went to the Grey Havens, he brought his horse with him. Seems pretty tight, that horse.
Is he still riding Shadowfax? Because he doesn't. I remember in the last chapter it says that a gray pony or a white pony or whatever, but it doesn't actually say Shadowfax. I thought that was a little weird. They didn't call out my name.
It's Shadowfax. He's got Glamdring. He keeps Shadowfax.
Yeah.
Shadowfax has to make his way home.
Yeah. Maybe he returned him at Rohan. Maybe he gave him back. Because, he just hot-rodded that thing and nicked it, didn't he?
They gave it to him. Not that they can even give him away.
Yeah, but
those horses kind of pick who they go with.
You know, it took him, I remember I was looking through the appendices, it took him 2 or 3 days to get Shadowfax to ride him. While all this stuff's going on, and he's trying to get back to everybody. He has 2 or 3 days out of his time.
But it was that's a cool horse, though. That's a cool horse.
So next, he should have just taken a slower horse, and he probably would have still been there quicker, because he wouldn't have batted around for 3 days.
But then he would have been able to outpace the storm to Minas Tirith.
And doesn't it say that Shadowfax won't take a rider again? So what happens when Gandalf leaves with left? Then Shadowfax just runs around doing nothing?
No, Shadowfax makes horse babies.
Makes
baby horses.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, animals can have lives outside of people.
Well, I'm not doubting that, but I'm just saying, it's this magnificent horse and he's not going to be ridden by anybody.
I think that the Rittermark will be very glad to have one of the king of the Mirias back, so if they could put it to Shadowfax to stud, man.
All right. They're just gonna walk ponies out in front of it.
It's not much of a life, isn't it? Being pipped out.
Being what?
Being pimped out as a stud horse.
Pimped out.
It sounds glamorous, but it's get to it.
I thought you said paper towel.
Melted down for glue.
I love Butterbur. He's, I think, probably one of my favorite minor characters.
I think you need to explain, because my favorite character is Faramir, so you need to, do a bit of...
No, I'm talking about a minor character. Faramir isn't exactly minor, is he?
Well, if you watch the movies...
Butterbird's even more minor in the movies.
Yeah, he practically doesn't exist.
He hides underneath the counter.
But he provides, good food and drink, and what's not to like?
And he has a cudgel.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole Bree scene is really good, actually. I really like how they're in the common room and they've been on this epic journey and destroyed evil, and the people are asking, hey, did you finish your book?
It just shows how completely oblivious the people out in the West are.
Actually, it says that, Sam and Merry and Pippin are held in very high regard after the whole Battle of Bywater, but that Frodo is kind of forgotten because he sort of just, retires from life, basically. But Sam, Merry, and Pippin hold a very, very high position afterwards until, they die.
Well, because Sam becomes there 6 times, but...
And Merry and Pippin wear their armor and their swords around the Shire the rest of their lives.
Everyone's ooh, shiny.
They're 7 feet tall for hobbits now.
Just reading the other, the chapter before the ones we started on, and Frodo's like, you're taller than you used to be, or I'm a dwarf. And Gimli's like, you're not a dwarf. And I was like, why would they have that as a frame of reference? Why would Frodo be like, I'm a dwarf? Wouldn't that be taller than normal to them?
I was really amused by Gimli, like, confirming, you're not a dwarf.
Yeah,
Oh, man,
you're not a dwarf.
That was a legitimate question.
Kind of intelligent.
As far as like the Bree people not really knowing what's going on outside, they're like, these people are coming back from a war where thousands and thousands of people have died, and they get back and they're like, yeah, it's been crazy here. I think like 2 and 3 people have died here. It's crazy. And that just shows you the difference between the two areas. Like, nobody dies in Bree. It's strange to die. And
Actually, I mean, this comes up, we have this thread that I started on Podcast Ice and Fire about what's your JFK moment, like what's the worst tragedy that you remember. And it was really interesting in that, of course, a lot of the Americans were like 9/11, and for a lot of people from Asia, it was like, well, you know, not to sound callous, but that really just wasn't as big a deal to us. And there was this local thing that was huge for us where, you know, maybe more or less people died, arguably less, but it just goes to show that your point of from which you have your perspective can radically alter your feeling of whether something's huge or not. And I think that's it's a really astute judgment of human nature. Like, you know, we'll talk about the global financial crisis. People in Australia are like, what? It's not global. We didn't have it. So we can't blame them for not being aware of shit that wasn't happening.
Yeah, they don't have TVs, so...
They don't have HBO Westeros news service.
Yeah, I think since we're talking about Lord of the Rings, and that's very similar to World War One. I think World War One didn't have much of an impact on like Asia at the time because most of the fighting was in Europe. All of the fighting actually was in Europe. But then World War Two had a major effect on even like India and all, because there were a lot of troops that were fighting in like Hong Kong and Japan and whatnot. So it had like a much larger effect than World War One had, because World War One was just too far away.
On to the next chapter?
Yes, I finished my summary finally.
Yay! Just in time delivery, Nadia, the podcast.
Yeah. Okay, I have no idea why I always pick the longest chapters. I didn't even think about this one, and anyway. Okay, so the scouring of the Shire. Frodo and his fellow hobbits reach the Brandywine Bridge only to find spiked gates barring their way instead of a warm welcome. There are ugly buildings beyond the bridge, and the gatekeeper turns out to be the surly Bill Fanny. Frodo and company are informed that no one is allowed in after dark, but Merry and Pippin scale gates and scare away Bill Fanny with their shiny swords. They stay the night in the guardhouse and find out just how bad things are in the Shire. They leave for Hobbiton the next day, but as they reach Frogmorton in the evening, they are arrested by a large group of sheriffs. Frodo and company find this hilarious. The next day they again head to Hobbiton and force the sheriffs to march in front of them until eventually they tire and stay behind. Once they reach Hobbiton, they see the destruction that has been caused and find a group of surly-faced men, but again they are scared off by shiny swords. Frodo and company realize the ruffians will soon regroup and return to fight, and then something must be done now. So Merry blows his horn to raise the Shire, and Sam goes off to fetch the Cottons and reunite with Rosie. By the time he returns, over 100 hobbits have gathered and all are armed. Frodo doesn't want anyone to die, but Farmer Cotton tells him it is already too late for that, as blood has already been shed. Pippin heads off to the Smears to fetch the Tooks. Soon after, the ruffians are seen approaching the place where the hobbits have lit a large fire. They set up barriers at both ends, and when the ruffians reach the first barrier, they are simply allowed through, only to find they are surrounded by archers when they reach the fire. The lead ruffian attacks Merry, but is shot down. The rest surrender and are tied up. That night, over dinner, Farmer Cotton tells them about the people who have been arrested by the chief's men. They also learn about Sharky and find out that he is the person in charge now. Sam's gaffer arrives and is only concerned in whether Sam has given Frodo perfect satisfaction or not, and why Sam doesn't wear a waistcoat anymore. Early the next morning, they hear that a large band of ruffians approaching, but Pippin returns first, followed by 100 armed Tooks. Merry quickly organizes an ambush for the ruffians. Fighting soon begins, and the ruffians try to fight their way out. Most of them are killed, but 19 hobbits also die in the fighting. So ends the Battle of Bywater, the last battle fought in the Shire. Frodo and company then head to Bag End to deal with Lotho and Sharky. They find out that Bagshot Row has been totally destroyed. They find that Sharky is in fact Saruman and that Lotho has been murdered by Grima. The hobbits are out for blood and want to kill Saruman, but Frodo lets him go. He offers Grima the chance to stay and recover. But Saruman taunts Grima, and as he turns, Grima stabs him in the back. Grima is immediately shot down. Around the body of Saruman, a grey mist rises, but is blown away by a cold wind from the west. The hobbits think this is the end of it, but Sam reminds them they still have to clean up all the mess.
First thing, like, when Merry blows the horn, Pippin was supposed to cry there, because they said he could never hear the horn again without having tears come to his eye, but he doesn't, so that's horseshit. And then, I think it's crazy how easily Saruman is subdued. They just, like, kind of tell him, why don't you leave? He's like, alright, I'm leaving. Fine. It's just, what? What?
Just Frodo has become so much of a pacifist by now. He doesn't, even in the beginning, he wants to make sure that nobody dies. But then the hobbits tell him, there are people already dying, that there's been fighting already. So it's not like we're the ones out for blood. They're not going to back down without a fight, and we have to kill someone.
It's crazy how easy.
Yeah, I think Frodo isn't exactly being practical right now.
Well, I think
Frodo not a pacifist, but
actually Frodo says that, like, when Saruman is giving his whole speech, like trying to intimidate the hobbits, Frodo says that don't believe him, that the only power he has left is his voice. And I think that's from when Gandalf broke Saruman's staff, that he sort of stripped him of all his powers, that he only has his voice left. And that's true in a way, and that's why he's leaving, because he can't actually, like, shoot fireballs or anything like that anymore.
Right.
Saruman knows that he can't hold the Shire, that it's over. The king then are eventually going to come, or Gandalf will come. It's just his final screw you to the hobbits, to make as much damage as he can.
Right.
He's still causing damage, right? He could simply move on to the next place and, start influencing people there with the power of his voice, which he still has. And it's, why wouldn't you just finish him off?
Because that's not the way Tolkien wrote it.
Almost sad the way it said the smoke that rose from his body, it kind of started to drift to the west, and that cold wind blew it away.
When they met him on the road, they like even told him that he could come with them over the sea, and he's like, that's not what I want. I don't want that. And then here he like starts to go west when he turns into like this steam cloud, and then he gets blown east. So it's strange. And the other thing that's strange to me is that these hobbits all of a sudden are like warlords when they were like the most feeble people ever back when they were fighting down south. But now they like have it all worked out.
I mean, the tactics they use are pretty simple, and the people they're fighting against are kind of dumb.
They must be.
Yeah. The thing that I found the most interesting was just like on the ongoing theme of like evil devouring itself. The state of Saruman's corpse is really fast. It's just really interesting because the way that it's like long years of death were suddenly revealed in it, and it shrank, and the shriveled face became rags of skin upon a hideous skull. It's just like Saruman had gone bad for so long that like I guess even his Maiar nature couldn't preserve him in a way. Because I feel like that wouldn't happen if Gandalf died.
It's like that scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when he turns to dust.
Yeah.
He chose poorly.
Pretty
Gandalf, when he died, I guess his old body must have somehow disappeared or something, because he came back all white. He gets a dye job.
Yeah, my understanding of that is like he floats over to Manos, and Manos is not Manos, Manwë. Whoever's the Lord of the Halls of the Dead, or whatever. And he was just Mandos. I was saying Manos because Manos the Hands of Fate. Anyway, Mandos is just like, nah, not yet. Actually, we need you to go back.
And his shoulders slumped. He's like, I killed a Balrog. Everybody who kills a Balrog dies.
It's true.
And
he's like, Glorfindel went back. He's like, you're right. All right.
Yeah.
This is kind of going back to, going into the appendices, but I find it interesting in the Tale of Years that Gandalf actually spent like 20 days on the mountaintop. He was dead for 20 days, I guess. I guess you meant that his spirit sort of went to Valinor, I guess, and then he got returned to the place where he died, respawned over there, so.
Yeah, I picture it like he goes up in like a cloud like Saruman did and heads over there, and then they tell him, no, you gotta go back. Then he goes back into his body somehow, and then his body needs to be rejuvenated because it's all wasted and old from not having life in it, I assume. I don't know.
Is that line from the movies when he's like, Gandalf is like tripping and seeing all the stars and like that, and he's just like, every moment was as long as a lifetime on the earth or something like that.
Yeah, he's like, I passed through Earth and time. That's like, what?
Yeah, okay, Maiar rebirth logistics. So that's enough of that.
Anything
Yeah,
else?
but it was also very clear to me to hear that nobody has killed anyone in the Shire for centuries. It's surprising. They're very jovial people. They don't get lured into a fight very easily.
And they don't really have weapons. I think that's a big plus for them. I mean, I'm sure there's been
But
fist fights.
these people turn up with like axes and stuff. They have like
Tools.
tools for building and stuff, so they can use those for weapons, right?
Yeah.
It's because
We
they're
have
like
bows
an
and arrows
agrarian
and stuff.
culture.
Yeah, the Took showed up with bows. But the last time they had archers, they disappeared, so that's why they probably didn't want. They sent like 1,000 archers to the last alliance, but they were never heard from again. So they probably like, archers suck.
Oh man, I love this part when the farmer Cotton says like, yeah, no, the ruffians don't go into Tuckland because the Tucks hunt them.
Right. Because they were saying that the Tooks actually drew first blood.
It's just hunting them like animals. That just pleases me greatly.
Some badass ninja hobbits roaming the trees.
Yeah.
I think the Tooks and the Brandybucks are sort of different from like the ones that live in Bywater, Hobbiton, right?
They
The
definitely are.
Tooks and Brandybucks are like a little wilder than these hobbits.
That's like the big thing in The Hobbit, like Bilbo's Baggins side versus his Took side. Like his Took side wants to have an adventure and go out, but then his Baggins side just wants to sit at home and do nothing.
That's kind of interesting that Pippin is sort of like the meekest of the hobbits, kind of, at least until he gets some character development. But I guess he is the youngest as well.
Yeah.
But he's a Took, and even, is he the heir?
Yes.
Yes. So is Mary of Brandybucks.
Well, it's never really established if he is the heir, but eventually Pippin becomes the king, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, I mean, he does inherit,
There's a
but it wasn't necessarily the heir apparent when he was a kid. I mean, it's kind of weird that they would let their heirs go off like that, but I guess they sort of went off secretly there.
Mm. It does say he becomes the Thane, so...
I love the part when they sort of first talk to the ruffians and they're sort of talking shit to Frodo and like there's like some reference to the king that things are going to be different now and the ruffians sort of dismiss that and Pippin sort of just draws his sword and says that I'm a messenger of the king and you're going to fucking listen to me right now. That's great.
If they learn nothing else from Aragorn, they learn how to draw their sword.
He's like, here's Trollsbane, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's basically how they scare off Bill Ferny, and that's how all they do is take out their swords. That's it.
And I like it when they're running away and they're blowing the horn. He's like, I can blow a horn too, man.
Aragorn gave them the gift of violence.
Sam and Rosie, they're so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, have we finally reached the final chapter of this book? This is like epic.
We have.
So the man, the podcaster who started us on this epic quest now brings us to a close. EastTexasDirewolf.
Chapter 9, The Grey Havens. Frodo, he releases the prisoners in the little hobbit jail they made for him. Releases Fatty Bulger, who we haven't seen since the first book. Lobelia, with a sacked Bill Baggins, is released, and she gets kind of a cheering ovation when she's released, which kind of touches her and makes her feel good because she was never popular. And she actually gives Baggin back to Frodo because she says she can't go back there anymore after the bad memories and finding out that Lotho was murdered. She also ends up leaving all her money for helping hobbits that were left homeless by the Troubles. And the book says that that feud was ended. I thought that was sweet. Frodo is made deputy mayor while Will Wilfoot recovers. And Merry and Pippin are pretty much in charge of clearing out the last of the ruffians. Which doesn't take them too long. It says by Yule, which I assume is a winter holiday / Christmas equivalent. Most of the work taking down the brick buildings built by Shark and his men is done. They use a lot of the brick for rebuilding hobbit holes. Bagshot Row is rebuilt and renamed New Row, a simple, proper hobbit name. Though in Bywater, it's kind of a joke. it's sometimes called Sharpie's End. The building work goes by pretty quickly because hobbits are pretty industrious, but the job of replanting plants and things is something that's probably going to take a lot longer, Sam worries about. So he goes about using the gift from Galadriel to replant trees and take care of all the gardening work. He plants trees with the speck of dust from the Galadriel's box, and he plants the seed that's in the box where the great tree was that Bilbo had his party under in the clearing. And it grows into a Malorn. I guess that's like a magic elf tree or something.
That's the trees that Galadriel created.
Yep.
Okay. Grows into a big, beautiful tree that the people travel far and wide to see. All the trees that Sam grew, or planted, I should say, quickly grow in the Shire. Sam worried that the Shire would be generations before the hobbits and the hobbit children would see the Shire as he knew it in his youth, but it doesn't take nearly that long at all. 1420, which is the next year after they come in, the hobbits come back to the Shire in the fall, and that next year is 1420, and it's a wonderful year. There's great weather, crops are plentiful. It's almost a magical year. There's a lot of beautiful golden-haired children born that year.
But that was kind of weird, like that golden-haired children are sort of superior, like that they're born to everybody like that. Okay.
You could take something cool like that and make it a negative elf thing. There's no illness, hardly to speak of, and everyone was pleased except those that had to mow the grass, which I can appreciate. I'm probably going to have to do that this afternoon. Let's see. The 13th of March, Frodo is ill once again. Sam is away. He doesn't see it. After they get Bag End rebuilt, Frodo moves back in, and Sam marries Rosie, and they move back into Bag End with Frodo. Frodo settles into sort of a quiet routine, which we touched on earlier. He kind of stays in Bag End riding, and he doesn't get sort of the quote-unquote renowned in the Shire that Sam and Merry and Pippin do. Because Sam's around doing gardening, helping restore the Shire, and Merry and Pippin are riding around in their armor and laughing and singing songs. It says that on October 6th of that year, a shadow passes over him, which is 2 years from the day when he was stabbed on Weathertop. Then the next March, in 1421, he's ill once again, but he hides it. And on March 25th, Eleanor, Rosie and Sam's daughter, is born. In the autumn of that year, 1421, Frodo asks Sam to go see him off to Rivendell, or it's what Sam thinks, because it's going to be Bilbo's 131st birthday. He's going to pass the Old Took, and he's going to be gone a fortnight, which I had to look that up. It's 2 weeks. I guess y'all over there in the old countries, y'all know that, right? Fortnight?
Do you not use the word fortnight in America?
No.
I don't know what it means.
Really?
2 weeks.
Really?
Even I don't know what fortnight means. I mean,
Well, you're from a different country.
I'm genuinely, I thought that was, I mean, I know it's all weird English phrases, but I thought that was genuinely quite normal.
Yeah,
I mean-
we learned that from George.
I know it from books. We don't actually use it in the States, though, at least not on the East Coast.
So how would you say someone's going away for 2 weeks?
We're going away
Something
for
like
2
that.
weeks. Yeah.
You know what this stems for, I think, because like in Europe we have a lot more vacation, like from work, so you do genuinely go on holiday for a fortnight for summer every summer, or if not a month if you're in France. Whereas you guys don't have any vacation, so like you just don't need a word for going away for 2 weeks, because that would be like all your vacation in one go.
I think if you're lucky, you get a week over here in the summer.
Yeah.
I'm
All right,
genuinely flummoxed.
Let's see. Frodo, in preparing for the journey, he gives the Red Book to Sam, which was started by Bilbo, more or less finished by Frodo, but there's pages left that Frodo tells are for Sam. So they go on their journey. Sam and Frodo are camping a couple of nights out, and they run into Bilbo and a bunch of useless elves. Among the elves are Elrond and Galadriel, and they're now openly wearing their rings of power, which I thought was pretty interesting. I guess they don't work anymore.
That's because they're kind of not rings of power anymore, right? So they're just baubles.
Yeah, they don't do anything anymore.
Frodo reveals to Sam that he is going with Bilbo, and they're going over the sea to, heaven, wherever. We're up for debate about that, I guess. Frodo hints that Sam may join him later, and there's this nice, beautiful little passage that Frodo says that I was going to read here. I thought you were going to enjoy the Shire too for years and years after all you have done. So I thought too once, but I have been too deeply hurt, Sam. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. It must often be so, Sam, when things are in danger. Someone has to give them up, lose them, so that others may keep them. But you are my heir. All that I had and might have had, I leave to you. And also you have Rose and Eleanor, and Frodo lad will come, and Rosie Lass and Mary, and Goldilocks and Pippin, and perhaps some more that I cannot see. Your hands and your wits will be needed everywhere. You will be the mayor, of course, as long as you want to be, and the most famous gardener in history. And you will read things out of the Red Book, and keep alive the memory of the age that is gone, so that people will remember the great danger, and so love their beloved land all the more. And that will keep you as busy and as happy as anyone can be, as long as your part of the story goes on.
It's so moving. Oh my god.
So lovely.
Sad.
Oh.
And I love the scene in the movie where Elijah uses that phrase, it has been safe, but not for me. Oh, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was actually his last day of filming as well.
Or the
I feel like Frodo might have overstepped his bounds a bit, naming all his children for him. That's not really fair.
I think
Yeah, but
it kind of...
you don't even get to name even one. That's so unfair.
Well, I thought that sort of kind of cemented to me that Frodo kind of had almost, what do you want to call it, like, clairvoyant.
Farsight.
Yeah, farsight or something. He could see things. Because throughout the book, he sees that he's going to leave Middle Earth, I think. There's sense of that, like at Tom Bombadil's house.
Yeah, he also didn't think they'd ever
kinda,
make it back, so his farsight's for shit.
It's true. One of the cool things that I read in another book, I don't remember if I talked about this before, but that Frodo's test really wasn't the ring. You know, in the grand scheme of things, Frodo's test was Gollum, that if he showed mercy on Gollum or whether he didn't. And because he passed that test, Gollum played his part and saved Frodo.
Yeah.
So, that's
an optimistic way to think Frodo didn't fail.
Yeah. They ride to the Grey Havens and they're met by Círdan. Is that how you say his name?
Círdan the bearded elf? Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, he's got a beard. I thought he was an elf. That's what I never noticed that. I was reading that this morning.
And he's old.
It's against the rules.
Yeah, he's old.
I don't know. I think Círdan would be the one elf that Peter would like.
Círdan's the one that gives Gandalf the ring, right? When Gandalf comes to Middle Earth.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he has to be an elf, and he's got a beard. Okay. Anyway, they meet Gandalf there, who's waiting on them, and Gandalf's also openly wearing his ring of power, or what used to be a ring of power. Merry and Pippin ride up as they're boarding the ship. Everybody says goodbye. Sam's sad, and everybody else is sad. Sam and Merry and Pippin ride back together, and then Sam departs from Merry and Pippin, returns home. Rosie puts Eleanor in his lap, and he says, "Well, I'm back."
The end.
Aww.
The end.
Oh.
Except for the
Finally.
hundreds of pages of appendices.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
I love that Sam has the final word, and it's such a homely, modest sentence after all the craziness.
I like that he always had this dream of being the greatest gardener when he had the ring on, and then when he went back home, he became the greatest gardener.
And his surname changes, right? He becomes Sam Gardner. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Must be Gamgee was his slave name.
Oh, my word. Except you can read the whole etymology of the name Gamgee in, like, Appendix.
Yeah,
Appendix
Yeah.
F, Section 3, Subsection 2, or something ridiculous.
Yep. Guys, I think I know why Círdan has a beard.
Okay.
First of all, if you Google Círdan the Shipwright, the first thing is that Google automatically fills out beard. Apparently it's because he's the same age as Thingol, who was, this gets into the Silmarillion stuff a little bit, but Thingol and, was married to a Maiar. Luthien Tinuvel was his kid. So Círdan came over when Thingol came over, which was, like, in the First Age. So
yeah, he's like the oldest elf left.
He's crazy old. Yeah.
But so is Galadriel, and she doesn't have a beard.
I mean, yeah. But she... Alright.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like moss that has grown on his face because he's so lethargic just sitting by the water all the time.
It's, yes, lichen.
If Galadriel had a beard, would she have been more attractive to Gimli?
Maybe that's why he was so attracted to Galadriel. She did have a beard.
So has everyone read the appendices? For most of them?
I read
Good
all
part.
of the appendices
I
last night
read them.
for the first time in about 10 years, so...
I didn't
That is
touch the
sad.
language stuff.
Because
I
it's almost
scanned
like
it, but it's been so long.
I think it's almost a disservice that it's kind of back there and relegated, and there's so much good information in there that I think a lot of people probably miss it.
Right.
Yeah, I
Especially
mean,
like
it's
Appendix
interesting.
A. Is it Appendix A? Is that an Appendix B? I mean, like some of the runic stuff is not necessarily as important, but
Yeah.
I don't care so much about like the histories of the houses, but I like when they actually tell parts of the story.
Yeah. Like when Arwen goes off and just dies in the woods of sadness.
And we get like all of the endings for all of the fellowship, right? Where they
Yeah.
eventually end up. Yeah. So that's all in the appendices.
Yeah.
And Aragorn's mother, Gilraine, who's awesome. She's a great character, actually. It's just very tragic and sad.
Yeah, that's the saddest thing ever.
Yeah.
Give my hope to men, but keep none for myself.
I have no hope for myself. Yeah.
Then just dies. And Aragorn tries to like comfort her, but nope, dies.
oh, we're so harsh. So how do you guys want to do? Do you just want to like shout out questions you have from the appendices, or cool shit, or go through them? Because I have some questions. Because I mean, I haven't really finished reading the Silmarillion, so maybe this is all like really obvious to everyone else.
I mean, the outline you have here in the document, like, could be something we could all work off of. Just, like, questions per appendix. Just because, like, Appendix A is just all of the history, and then Appendix B is all of the timelines. Yeah.
I wrote all that out to prove that I'd read it.
I know you're amazing. You did such a good job.
I've got a lot of stuff on the timelines, but a lot of it can probably be covered while we're covering the other things, so you don't have to, like, go through two separate things.
Okay, so Appendix A is kind of the history of the different peoples, and Part 1 is all about Gondor and sort of how the Númenórean kings basically made an arrogant attempt to join the elves in the Grey Havens and in the Undying Lands, and then were sort of bitch-slapped back to Middle-earth.
That was more than a bitch slap.
Yeah, like your kingdom was destroyed. And then, you know, shit that went on between the northern and the southern men, and how Gondor fell barren, and, you know, the watch on Mordor was neglected, and then sort of comes into the early period of, you know, what was going down with Sauron. Well, actually, one of the things I kind of found quite interesting was there was this one guy, this one descendant of Ardavui, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right, who tried to claim the crown but was rejected by the then steward. So it wasn't like Aragorn was the first person of his line to try and take Gondor back. It's just he's the first person who did and was accepted, which I kind of found quite interesting.
And that person actually had the right to claim the crown, because not only had he married like the previous king's daughter, but he was also like his nephew, I think. His mother was like his mother would have been next in line, but since his mother was dead, he was, you know, he should have been the one who inherited.
Yeah.
He didn't have a big sword.
Yeah,
Right.
he didn't have the sword. That was evidently the decisive factor.
But was that the same Avadu who died in the snow?
Yeah.
The last king of Arna?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he was.
Back when Sauron like is taken prisoner by the Númenóreans, I just thought it was interesting, like the tale of years. It took him 48 years to corrupt them into like deciding to go against the Valar. So that just shows you Sauron definitely can play the long game.
Indeedy.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting how powerful the old men were. I mean, I know they lived for like, you know, a couple hundred years, but to them to rival the power of the elves, and I don't know, I thought that was kind of crazy.
More than rival it, I mean, Sauron just flat out gave up when they showed up at his gates.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I thought was interesting was like, so you have this period where an earlier Glorfindel and Éomer defeated I guess even it's a different Glorfindel, right? Defeated the Witch King.
Same one.
Oh, the same one.
Glorfindel.
Okay. But they let the Witch King go, and then he goes off and gathers the race. So what was that about?
Well, Glorfindel had this. I haven't looked at it in a while, but Glorfindel had the sight, and he knew that the Witch King wouldn't be killed by a man, like the arms of men.
Oh, so it wasn't so much he let him go, but just acknowledged that it wasn't.
He didn't have the foresight. He was just like too much for cover to go and kill the Witch King, so he just said,
Shit, elf.
The thing is, Glorfindel isn't a man. Then why can't he kill the Witch King?
Yeah, he's an elf.
Yeah, doesn't he kind of say it? I was thinking something along that lines, too, because it's after the fact he escapes or something. And then he says, well, no weapon forged of man can kill him, so we'll just let him go.
And then we get into the sort of like more modern prehistory of the Wars of the Ring. So we get how the Stewards ruled, Osgiliath was retaken, and then you have like the Rohirrim helping Gondor out and defeating the Balchoth. And then we get this really kind of cool, interesting stuff about the White Tree dying and Ecthelion to trusting Thorongil. And because I'm an idiot, so I don't quite realize that Thorongil was Aragorn. And then, like, Thorongil's advising Ecthelion and saying, or Denethor, and saying, don't trust Saruman, trust Gandalf. And I was wondering, like, I want more information from you, Lore Masters, on this whole Thorongil episode. And also, how does he know not to trust Saruman already? Has that already been discovered in the timeline? Because I'm confused.com.
And I just wanted to say, don't feel bad, Dina. I only knew who Thorongil was because I read, like, fan fiction that involved him. So, the only reason I knew he was Aragorn. And I have no idea. I don't think Saruman had betrayed them at this point. It's just that Gandalf seems more interested in defeating Sauron, whereas Saruman is more interested in gathering knowledge and power, and I think even at that point. So maybe Aragorn, with his foresight, can just tell that Gandalf is the person to trust.
I mean,
and I think that's the reason.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason Denethor would choose to side with Saruman over Gandalf, because his father listened to Thorongil and allied with Gandalf.
Well, if you think about it, Saruman took over Isengard around the time before Thorongil came to help Ecthelion II.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Maybe Aragorn was jealous that Saruman took, like, his...
Palantir.
Yeah, I mean, living in his tower and hogging his Palantir. Because they were right by his... I mean, Isengard was like a tower of the Númenóreans, I guess.
Aragorn's so dramatic when he's Thorongil. He departed into the shadows whence he came, before the days of Ecthelion were ended. It's just like he rides in, acts all weird, acts as a captain, then pieces out again, not telling anybody.
Yeah, just straight up ruling shit. He's like, helps Rohan out, helps out Gondor, and then just, I gotta go do something else now. See you later.
He's like a single person A-team. If you're in trouble, and if you can find him.
Actually, I thought that if they want to make more movies, they might actually do like a Aragorn prequel, because there's some good stuff in here, like him like fighting with Rohan and being a guy in Gondor and going to Corsair City, Umbar, and burning all the ships, and even like going on a secret spy mission to the lands of the East.
Definitely. And from the emotional aspect, I mean, all the stuff with his mom, and yeah, definitely. And, you could have, like, him as a kid not knowing who he is, and sort of Elrond mysteriously telling him at the age of 20, you're not some schlub, you're actually...
You're pretty important,
that was a little
not
strange.
important enough for my daughter.
Like, he's gonna live like a couple hundred years. He's gonna keep it from him until he's 20. It's like, why didn't you just tell him?
Well, I guess he's physically sort of matured at that point.
Elrond as a teenager would have been terrible.
I mean, didn't Aragorn himself think, how come I, as just some random bloke, am allowed to live amongst all these high elves and, get treated with such respect? I mean, you would be wondering, maybe I'm somebody of significance there. And then also, the other bit I love is, when suddenly he goes off traveling and he comes back and then he meets Arwen, and he's like, Elrond, I see you have another daughter. And he was like, yeah, whatever, with her mum. It's like, how would you not know that he had this daughter who was, like, renowned in all the world for being so beautiful?
They kept him down in the cellar.
Willing suspension of disbelief.
She was off for the entire time he was there. I mean, 20 years is a blink of an eye to an elf. She was over with Galadriel the whole time he was there.
Yeah.
So he just didn't know anything about her.
Yeah.
Have I not mentioned in the last 20 years, my daughter?
But, it's like, I can have a relative who lives abroad and I might not see them for 5 years, but I'm not going to ever, like, not mention to the people I'm close to in everyday life that, my aunt, I really miss my aunt, or my aunt called or something. Like, the fact that Elrond's never even mentioned that he has this daughter called Arwen.
I mean, it's not like Elrond has photo albums, guys, with, like, pictures of Arwen being, look at my daughter, look how beautiful she is, you're not good enough for her. Anyway.
It'll just seem needlessly mysterious to me.
There was Aragorn as a child. Did he sort of befriend Eladan and Elrohir during that time, or?
Yeah, he did.
Would've.
Yeah.
I think he did.
So they never mentioned their sister either. But I guess they just talk about swords and hunting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is what guys do. They just chat about swords and shit and not their families.
Maybe Aragorn was the Brandon Stark of his time.
And how long their beards are and how Nordic they are, I don't know.
Real quick, while we're talking about him, Elrond actually wed his wife, and then it took him 21 years to have his sons. And then it took another, it's like 111 before he had Arwen. So that's the kind of time you're looking at for the elves. And then his wife died, but not till like
She didn't die, so
right, she
stolen by orcs and poisoned or something.
I'm going to ask this in a not entirely facetious way. Is it that they just because everything is attenuated for them, so it's not like they don't have sex for 20 years, but it's just that, and then when they do have sex, it takes a really long time because everything takes a long time, or is it that sex is still a blink of an eye and then they wait 40 years and then they have sex again?
Well, she died.
Maybe
she left.
Just because they're immortals, the gestation period is really, really, really long.
Well, I don't buy that
like
because
elephants.
she went overseas 2,269 years after Arwen was born. So there was plenty of time in there to have a couple more kids.
What? Come on, people choose not to have more kids every day. It was their choice not to have more kids. Come on.
Maybe they were just
Maybe
the
Aragorn was
shittiest
like
children ever.
Maybe
we're not
Elrond was
having
like,
it.
that was so awesome, I can never top it. We're done.
Maybe.
But it would make sense for elves not to reproduce every year, because if they did and they lived forever and they just kept on reproducing, they would overrun the earth.
Well, maybe
they should.
Maybe
have.
the elves of the first age were like people in the 60s, and then they just screwed everything up, and they're like, oh, we gotta chill out.
That is actually how they felt. When they started wielding the three rings, they were like, yeah, we'll just live in the past and not try to do anything new. It's just,
I found something. I think I found something about elf reproduction.
Yeah, I'm not gonna Google that.
I was a little afraid of what would happen, but luckily it was just the Lord of the Rings wiki. And I think apparently it's just what happens is they give birth like normal, but elven kids mature really slowly. So when they're in their 20s, they look like they're 7.
That would suck.
Then why weren't there more, we never hear of elven children. You think there would have been some around. They never talk about them, they never bring them up.
And then we never see 4 or 5 either, right?
So they got screaming newborns for years.
Oh no, they haven't hatched out of their eggs.
Alright, do you guys want to move on and talk about the Rittermark?
I just wanted to point out that after the Last Alliance, the Siege of Barad-dûr lasted 7 years. How was Aragorn going to siege that place if it lasted 7 years with the Last Alliance and all the people?
What?
What?
The first Siege of Barad-dûr lasted 7 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. Aragorn just showed up there with a party of people. I know they were just playing, for time, but...
Oh yeah, you didn't have supply lines at all.
But that's crazy, a siege lasting 7 years on one
But
place.
at that time, there were no the dead marshes and all weren't there, right? So they had, we can assume that they could have, food shipped over there and stuff.
I just don't understand how Barad-dûr was getting supplies in. I mean, for 7 years?
I mean, they have the farmlands in the further south.
Well, you'd think they would have hijacked those lines.
Oh, true.
Why are we just sitting on this one side where they keep getting food from that side?
Well, I mean, Sauron and the Ringwraiths don't need to eat, so...
And all self-spendable, right?
Yeah, I guess they just eat each other.
Well, that's not good for your numbers.
They could be growing mushrooms or something downstairs. Something about Gondor that I wanted to mention was the Kingsgrave. They had a big civil war. I found that interesting, how that was a lot more grey than these books usually are. That the good guys actually had a civil war.
Absolutely. I also like the fact that in this chapter you see that plague makes a big difference, which, is very real world. The idea that, Rohan could be decimated by plague, and that's going to really make a difference as to whether they then hand over the keys to Saruman to the Orthanc, because they just are enfeebled, and feels much more realistic, right? That you can have civil war and plague and all this other disaster rather than just black and white.
Oh yeah, that's interesting that Eriador was kind of deserted because of the plague, because the kingdom of Arnor never really recovered from it, I guess. Is it implied that the plague was created by the Witch King or something like that?
Well, there are 2 plagues that are described. I think the second one, the one that really puts paid to Arnor, I think it's implied that somehow it has been malevolently created, but the first one I think was more natural, maybe.
Yeah, they just say they died in the spring sickness.
Yeah, there's this part about the kin strife, like how the actual heir sort of went to the Dale men, like near the borders of Mirkwood, and sort of established a court there. I find that kind of interesting, like how they had this kind of like mixing of the peoples. And I even think Theoden actually was fostered at Minas Tirith for most of his young life.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it kind of diminishes his worth as like being a Rohirrim in my eye, that he was raised in Minas Tirith.
God, you just sound like a Greyjoy. He's not a true Ironborn, he's just a wolf. Yeah.
Greenland's made him soft. Well, actually, the Rohan is more green than Gondor.
And I like the concept of these Eastern Wain Riders. I kind of, you know, I'd love to see a mini-series of all this stuff played out in a leisurely way with good CGI. Be awesome.
Yeah, the mini
Aragorn prequels would be pretty cool.
I can't believe you're asking for more Aragorn.
Well, come on, he was cool. I mean, they couldn't use Viggo Mortensen, I guess, but I guess they could use Liv Tyler.
I don't know, I disagree actually.
Liv Tyler as Aragorn?
I just saw a movie with Viggo Mortensen, and he is still hot.
Yeah, I mean, they could do, like, have him as old Aragorn, like, going over his memoirs or something like that, and doing, like, the handoff like they do in the Hobbit movies. But, I mean, he couldn't be young Aragorn.
I just think any time we have an excuse for Viggo Mortensen, we should use it. Anything more on Gondor and Gondorian history?
Oh, the last king of Gondor. I like that guy. He was just like a... He liked swords and... No, not that guy. I mean, Earnur, like...
He was dumb, wasn't he?
The one who forgot to get married and have heirs?
Yeah, he did it like chicks. He left swords.
The Witch King's like, come on, fight me fair. It's like, okay. And he goes out and he's like, alright, you're screwed. I got you.
He never comes back.
Yoink.
He just disappears off into the distance in an epic quest of dimwittery.
Yeah, I guess they flayed his soul and fed him to like demons and stuff like that.
I can just see him You see him showing up, and then they're like surrounded. He's like, "Yeah, this wasn't a very good idea, was it?"
Okay, so on to the House of Ale. Okay, so this is all about how Eorl became the first king of the Mark and captured the Maiars. How Helm Hammerhand. That is the best name in the book.
Yes.
I mean, like, fuck yes, Helm Hammerhand. I mean, how can you not respect a man with that name? Fort Freka, how the Dunlendings drove Rohan back to the Hornburg.
And a less impressive name of the kings is Walda, for a king.
But the guy did, let's not be coy. I mean, he did just die randomly frozen in the snow.
Hey man, it's better to die awesome than to
live
not
like
awesome.
Better to burn out than to fade away.
Yeah. And then there's all about how Saruman starts to gather power, calls himself the Lord of Isengard, and encroaches on Rohan. And then we get like a recap of the Theoden story in Eowyn. And then we get the kind of the ending for Éomer, that he ruled for 65 years and married the daughter of the Prince Imrahil, which is kind of cool. But basically, this is all about Helm Hammerhand being awesome. And all the spookiness, like people think they can hear the horn blowing at various points, so...
Yeah, when he went into the snow with his bare hands and just beat the Dunlendings to death. Oh man, it's so cool, and they were shitting their pants. They were like...
That's my brown trousers!
I mean, they were besieging his castle, and he was like scaring them to death. Oh, that's great.
Oh dear, he is so cool. Yeah, but apart from that, I was kind of, it's a shame there wasn't more on the House of Ale, but I guess it's a young house, so there's just not as much to say. But
well, I think there are more cool kings and stuff they did than there was in Gondor. I mean,
definitely. That's why I think it's a shame we just don't hear more about them. Like, they aren't given as much space.
Like the hunter who vowed not to hunt any beast until every orc in Rohan was slain, and when he actually did like hunt a boar, he got killed right away. Wah, wah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But that's probably the thing I've read most in the appendices, just the story of Helm Hammerhand. I mean, I've gone back like multiple times just to read that story again.
It's so cool. Well, I mean, it's kind of a dick move, but when the guy comes to his hall, like, asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. Like, he's like, come on, let's step outside, and puts a hand on his shoulder up. One punch and kills him there. Like, big move, but cool still.
You think after he was like, oops. Dude, get up.
Dude, are you okay? Oh, shit.
Must have the Rohirrim.
Yeah, started a civil war. Well, not really a civil war. I mean, they were Dunleadings, not really Rohirrim, were they?
Really just a step above wild men.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Bremen actually are sort of descended from the Dunleadings.
Yeah.
From the same group, kind of.
The wild men are sort of sui generis, aren't they?
Oh, and actually, El the Young, that way that, like, the cool white horse killed his dad, and he was, like, still riding it. That's kind of cool, somehow. I mean, like, yeah, this horse is so cool that it kills people.
Brackets, including my dad, close brackets. Wink, wink.
Did they actually call him a manslayer?
No, but they should have done.
I think they did.
Do we need to get into the dwarf bit of the appendix? Because, you know, like, Peter did set us this as homework.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the appendix itself in the episode, I don't think.
Okay.
I think we sort of discussed it in the first one, and the second one, I think.
I mean, it was kind of interesting because reading this again in the light of seeing the latest Hobbit movie, because you're getting a lot of the history of the Arkenstone and, you know, successive dwarf kings kind of reaching after their history and reaching after the Arkenstone and
There's, I don't know if we talked about this or not. Are dwarves immortal? Did we talk about this?
I don't think so, because Durin
No, they're
the
not.
Deathless is actually called Durin the Deathless, so that's kind of like a special attribute of his, I guess.
No,
They just
during
live a
the
long,
Deathless
long
is only called that because every time, you know, a new king is born, they just name him Durin. And he
Not
just, like,
every
during the
time.
first and the
This one is
second
cool.
during the- How do they know he's cool before he's grown up?
Well, they flipped
Anyway.
a coin when he was born.
It's-
He's either going to be great
Like,
or
Durin the
bad.
Deathless isn't actually alive. It's just like the sixth Durin or something. It's just that he keeps coming back and like he keeps getting reincarnated or something. It's kind of like that.
Do we get, like, them dying of old age, though? I don't remember
Yes,
that.
yes.
I'm sure it happened, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
By the
Oh
time
yeah,
they die, it's like the
Thorin
third, fourth
Oakenshields'
ratio.
grandfather. I think Thorin Oakenshields' grandfather or father, when he was like really, really old and he thought he died soon, he went back to like Moria to conquer it again, just to take it back because he thought it was.
Didn't he get his head cut off? I don't think that's dying of old age.
He did. He
Yeah,
did.
I mean,
No,
like-
he did. The only reason he went was because he was very old and he figured if he didn't do it then he'd never get the chance to do it.
The ring was also sort of driving him crazy.
Yeah. But dwarves aren't immortal. They die eventually of old age. They live
It
like
doesn't even look like they
200
live that long. Like 200 years looks like their lifespan.
Yeah, 200 or 300 years, I think.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Compared to the humans, it's pretty long. Is that all we have to discuss in the dwarves?
Well, I wanted to read this quote from, like, after the Battle of Azanulbizar, like, Thorin's father asks him, some would think that this head dearly bought, the head of Azak. At least we have given our kingdom for it. Will you come with me back to the anvil, or will you beg your bread at proud doors? To the anvil, answered Thorin. The hammer will be to the anvil, answered Thorin. The hammer will at least keep the arm strong until they can wield sharper tools again.
it's so freaking cool.
Yeah, and I love
like
the scene in the first Hobbit movie when Thorin is at the forge, like, hammering away at the, I don't know what he's forging, like a pot or a kettle or something.
I like it when they, after the battle, they like take all the dwarves' arms and shields and armor because they don't want the orcs to ever get a hold of dwarven metal.
Yeah.
And then they burn the dwarves when they usually...
Yep, the burned dwarves.
But I love how they're just so secretive that they won't speak their language to others willingly and that they won't reveal their true names and they won't even write them on their tombstones. But, you know,
Yeah, I mean, what's the point in hiding your name even after your death?
what's the point of
That's
having a
so-
name if no one's allowed to speak it?
Exactly.
Well, I guess there's a Tolkien thing about language, how it says power, and names especially have power, like knowing something's true name, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? I've read this dwarf appendix, and I have to say it is cool, and it does make you respect the dwarves as being awesome. And then you just think, if they're sort of quote, from the beginning of a kind to resist most steadfastly any domination, like why wasn't a dwarf chosen as ring bearer?
Well, he would have just taken it and went into a mountain and
hidden it,
gathered a hoard of gold and like bathed in it like Scrooge McDuck.
But they wouldn't be susceptible to wraiths, I think.
They don't turn into wraiths though, because they're too like hardy and made of the earth, something like that.
They could not be reduced to shadows enslaved by another will. I mean, that's huge. You cannot be made into a wraith.
Yeah, but it's kind of like something not equally as bad, but kind of super bad as well, happens to Thorin's father when he just keeps the ring and he just becomes like this wandering madman and gets captured and taken into the dungeons of Dol Guldur and tortured there, and it's not a good end for a dwarf with the ring, either way.
Which somehow, after all that, he keeps the key and map. I don't understand that. He must have hid them in a very sacred place, if you know what I mean.
You mean his beard?
Yes. What did you think I meant?
Anything more in dwarves? So then we get on to Appendix B, which is the chronology of the Westlands, which is basically, it's kind of like making you feel that, yeah, the elves did do shit. So it's how the war came to Lothlorien and Dale, and basically what was happening when the Battle of the Pelennor Fields was raging elsewhere in, I keep wanting to say Westeros, but Middle-earth. And then it goes into the sort of what happens to the hero hobbits after the story ended. So how Sam was 6 times mayor, how Pippin and Merry, they ride to Rohan for the death of Éomer, and then on to Gondor, where they're buried near Aragorn, which I think is a really cool end. And then Sam sort of rides off, and I put here, did he really go to the Grey Havens? And I'm guessing yes, because he's a ring bearer, so that's allowed.
I think Frodo said it pretty clearly, eventually you'll come west when your time comes.
I mean,
it's actually very sweet, he goes to his eldest daughter, he hands over the book, the red book, he puts it in her keeping, and he says goodbye to everyone, and then he leaves. It's not like he just ups and leaves one day.
Yeah, it's right after Rosie dies.
He actually takes the time to say goodbye and then leaves.
It's very similar to me, like Arwen's leaving. So her beloved dies, and then she goes off into sadness and dies. But in a sense, I know she's deliberately chosen a mortal life. It just seems really harsh. Like all these mortals get to go off and be together in this wonderful Grey Haven world, and yet Arwen just sadly dies on her own in a deserted wood. So sad.
Doesn't she have her kids? How many kids did they have?
Yeah, they had kids, but
she had one son and multiple daughters.
She goes off after Aragorn dies and just basically voluntarily dies on her own in the midst of a forest, no?
She goes to Lorien,
the same thing Aragorn did.
Yeah, but wouldn't she want to then go off and join her elf brethren? I guess you.
Well, she gave a ticket to Frodo.
Yeah, all the books are gone.
It just kind of feels like there were very strict rules, and then just whenever Tolkien feels a bit sentimental, you can change the rules. So if he'd have wanted to, of course, as the writer, he could have changed them for her too. It just seemed a bit harsh.
But was that before or after Legolas and Gimli sailed off? Because she could have hitched a ride with them, I guess.
After.
Well, she dies in Appendix A, and they don't go till Appendix B, so...
Well, they take place... Appendix A and Appendix B take place at the same time. It's just like the Appendix B is more of a timeline, so I think... Because she doesn't leave until after Aragorn dies. And around that time is also when the boat leaves, so I guess... And
actually, Legolas doesn't leave till after Aragorn dies either, so they could all have gone together.
Yeah, I mean...
since he was in Billion...
Yeah, but I don't think it would have been of much comfort for Arwen to go without Aragorn, I guess that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was wasting away.
Yeah, but Sam goes without Rosie.
Yeah, but he's gonna die.
But he's gonna die.
If an elf goes, they're gonna be immortal, I guess. If a mortal goes, they're gonna be mortal and die.
Mortals just die of bliss.
And they die faster there too. That's the thing for people who are not immortal. When they go to Elvenhome, time moves faster for them, and so they die pretty soon. It's not,
Or maybe that's just the elves' perspective. They're like, Jesus, he died in no time at all. I was like, dude, it's been 35 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, everyone that goes is a member of the Fellowship of the Ring, and maybe they're not ring bearers, but they're kind of proxy ring bearers, maybe.
Oh, when did contribute, she wove a flag. That's something.
But then I guess you have to feel bad for Merry and Pippin. I mean, they're members of the Fellowship, and they didn't get that option.
Well, they choose to die, though. They choose to stay.
Well, they give them a choice?
I don't think they have a choice.
I think Sam only got to go because he was the ring bearer. But
Yeah, like a quasi-ring bearer. Because Aragorn didn't get to go either.
yeah.
But then somehow Gimli gets.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that cool to go to over the sea. It's probably just elves singing all the time.
Like a punishment.
And I wouldn't want to go.
Don't the spirit of humans go on to sort of a paradise or heaven when they die on Middle Earth?
They do, but the elves don't know what it is.
Nobody knows what it is.
It's like the gift of men and curse at the same time.
It's then when it's written about Arwen and Elrond's last parting, it says, it was bitter because it would last beyond the end of time. So I'm assuming that elves and humans get like a separate heaven or something. Or elves just live in like Valinor and humans go to heaven.
The elves go to Elvenhome, which is like a little place outside of Valinor, and then they live there until Middle-earth ends. Whereas men go up to do something with Iluvatar that the elves don't know about.
Yeah.
So like outside of heaven, there's like a little house, and they gotta sit there.
Right, the outside of Valinor, they like have this little island, Polaricea, where they just hang out with other elves.
So,
I read this months ago, and I had some like ideas about some of the timeline entries, but now I've forgotten all of them.
Yeah.
I have quite a bit of things. I have quite a bit of things on just weird dates, like how long these things actually take place, and I think it's crazy long because like elves, huh?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah, tell us.
All right. Well, the wizards show up around like right around like year 1000, and
Third Age.
Right. And they discover there's like an evil at the stronghold of Dol Guldur that like thought to be the Nazgul, which Gandalf promptly checks out 963 years later. And
Well, he's walking everywhere.
yeah, well he gets there and Sauron retreats and he's like, well, I guess it was nothing. And then 400 years later they form the White Council to talk about the Dol Guldur issues. And then Gandalf goes back again, 1750 years after that. And he just checks it out.
So what you're saying is when they faff around with Tom Bombadil and we're getting impatient, we should chill the fuck out because actually we should be really lucky this whole story takes place in a year.
Right? It's just that the White Council really doesn't do anything. All they do is they're like, yep, let's not do anything. Yep, let's not do anything. It takes them like 118 years of the White Council to decide, no, we're not going to do anything about Dol Guldur right now. And then 91 years later, it's like, yeah, something might be going on there. Maybe we should check and see.
And then they're like, it's probably just a ring wraith.
Right, nothing big. No big deal. And I think it's interesting that the first meeting of Aragorn and Arwen, she's 2,710 years old and he's only 20, which makes him 0.7% of her age.
I love that you calculate.
And the second time they meet, he's 49 and she's 2,739, which gets him all the way up to 1.8% of her age. And when they get married, he's 88, she's 2,778, 3.2% of her age. And, because anything more than 3% is good, you can get married at that point. And when he dies, he's 210. He's 210 and she's 2,900 years old, 7.2% of her age. So he really didn't quite see as much as she did in his time. The last meeting of the White Council was 490 years. Wait, where am I here?
2953.
490 years after they discovered there was something going on. Like, they discovered Sauron was in Dol Guldur. It took them 490 years to actually decide to relocate him to Mordor, where they just continued to ignore him. So,
But I mean, I guess it's kind of ridiculous in any case, but I mean, some of that was like Saruman dragging his feet, like, it's nothing, it's probably nothing. I mean, come on. And like doing his own like river dredging operation on the side.
Right, but why are you listening to this guy? He's obviously giving you bad information. It takes, as far as
it's kind of funny, like,
Go ahead.
Okay, you go.
No. After you, sir.
No, I mean, what I've heard, like, in the Unfinished Tales and stuff like that they were doubting Saruman and suspecting him from the beginning, like, this guy's shifty. Let's send him anywhere. Let's make him the leader. And, like, Gandalf is, like, the good guy all along, and Saruman is still made the leader, and did he appoint himself the leader, or what happened there?
He just started calling himself the Lord of Isengard, so maybe he just appointed himself leader.
Gandalf defers to him, too, I mean...
He does. I mean, he's not thought necessarily to be bad at first. It just, over time, they start to suspect.
I mean, they suspect him from hundreds of years, and they're like, let's wait and see.
Well, we've talked about it. Gandalf doesn't like to act on anything. And he's not quite as wise as he pretends to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes him, let's see. This powerful wizard has known about the ring for 76 years before he decides maybe there's something more to this ring and goes to check it out.
And there are 17 years before between when Frodo inherits the ring and actually leaves for Rivendell. 17 years.
And that's 76 years after Bilbo discovers it and tells Gandalf about it.
Yeah.
That's a long
There's
time.
a lot of Aragorn delving around, capturing Gollum, having Gollum get away.
Gandalf, he read a scroll of Isildur, and that's how he knew it was the one. He probably could have gone and checked out those scrolls before that. He was like, I don't want to waste my time in a library. I'll try to find Gollum instead. I think it would have been...
No, it's like, I don't want to read those scrolls. I'm just going to make some fireworks and go to a party.
Yeah, smoke my pipe.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of pipe smoking going on, too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what happens to Radagast, that he completely loses himself to, Middle-earth, kind of, I guess, the pleasures of the being sort of mortal or having a body. He becomes almost like a forest spirit in the end, that he doesn't ever go back, that he... completely loses himself. I mean, I guess that didn't quite happen to Saruman, but I guess Milo version might have happened to Gandalf, how he grew close to the hobbits, and I guess he might have become a little bit complacent as well.
And who knows what happened to the blue wizards? They're just out there doing nothing.
Yeah.
I sort of view Saruman as kind of falling into that trap too. The flesh. I mean, it's not necessarily physical sensation, but I don't know, emotions. The emotions that you have as a mortal, like jealousy and greed.
Yeah, if you go by the 7 sins, I guess pride would be a big one for him. Yeah. Like what we talked about before, he actually wants to go to the west, but he can't his pride holds him back. He can't admit that he was wrong or ask for forgiveness.
When they sent the wizards over, their one job was to stop Saruman. Now Sauron, and, they couldn't actually use their power against them, so they had to control other people to doing it. But it took them 2,019 years to get it done. That's long.
They're immortal. It doesn't matter how long it takes.
Well, I bet you it mattered to the people who were dying in the meantime.
Well, yes, I'm sure it did, but it didn't matter to the Maiar, right?
The same way that Valar felt when... Oh, I won't go into that some early stuff. Never mind. Strike that from the record.
Well, it looks like you're going to have about 30 episodes to discuss the Silmarillion at length after this. Any other cool chronology stuff?
Well, I did like how they wrote that Galadriel single-handedly threw down the walls of Dol Guldur and laid the pits bare and cleansed the forest.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I wonder how is she supposed to have done that? Well, she doesn't have any power from the rings. What innate elf power does she have?
With her bare hands.
Yeah.
She's pushed.
She just went, rah, rah, tore down the walls.
And they kind of just had elves on the other side pulling it over to make her feel good.
Don't tell her. It'll already damage her self-esteem and she's been through a rough time. And wink.
And then, after she left, Celeborn was like, yeah, this place isn't that cool anymore. I think I'm going to leave. And then he heads off to hang out with Elrond's sons. It's like, yeah, you were the lord of this area.
Doesn't he make a dual kingdom with Thranduil in Mirkwood?
Yep.
Yeah,
they have
the
a north and south.
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that Celeborn, after Galadriel left, that it was kind of a relief to him. Like, God, I don't have to live in Lothlorien anymore, thank God. I'm gonna go found this kingdom here and hang out with my bro Thranduil. I mean, why didn't he go with his wife?
I think it's just because he wanted to be like, see, I'm the Lord of Lorien. Told ya. And then after she left, she's like, well, this place isn't as cool without her.
There's sort of a precedent, too, isn't there, of, husband and wife elves sort of leaving thousands of years apart? I guess Elrond's wife got her.
Elrond.
Yeah, his wife was all messed up, though. She hadn't been... Her loins hadn't ached in years, so she decided just to take off.
Well, that's his fault, right?
Yeah, that's all Elrond's fault. So that's pretty much all I've got. I just thought it was interesting how long things actually take in Middle-earth.
Oh, no, that was very cool, I have to say.
I think the crazy part is how much time Tolkien must have took figuring all this out.
Right. Oh, I also have down here that Gandalf had decided to meet with the hobbits in Bree. And then instead of going to Bree, he goes and meets up with the gaffer, like, in Hobbiton. Why didn't he just go to Bree like the plan, and then he would have been there when the hobbits showed up?
I think he went to Bree, and then he left a letter, and then he did to Hobbiton.
But he could have just waited.
There.
Maybe he needed for Aragorn, like, he could see that was how Aragorn was going to hook up with him, and that was important.
I was just going to say, he's literally, like, when you read the appendices here and look at it, he's, like, literally, like, hours behind them sometimes. Like,
right.
In the first chapter when you don't see him, he's really close.
So much for all-seeing and all-knowing, Gandalf. What a joke.
See, if he didn't have Shadowfax, he wouldn't have got, like, 4 days ahead of him in the Weathertop.
Yeah, he would have been there at the same time if he just took a normal horse.
Yeah, but I definitely like how sort of intricate all this world building is, like how he's plotted everything out to the day. It's kind of impressive, like compared to George R.R. Martin, for example.
Yeah.
He's just flying on the seat of his pants. Yeah, and then this happened.
I think he's actually said that it's like, just don't look at the dates and times too much, I mean.
He's kind of outsourced all that to Elio and Linda, hasn't he, really? He's like, yeah, I'm going to write, and it may be messy, but I'm just going to leave those guys to, like, tie it all up and keep track and whatnot.
Which I commend him for.
Appendix C family trees, of which I came to the conclusion that basically everybody's related to everybody in terms of Merry, Pippin, Frodo, and Bilbo are all kind of basically cousins or married to cousins, and
it's not a very large population, is it?
It's really incestuous, isn't it? I mean, basically...
Maybe that's why they're so small.
Yeah, I think like, in the real world, I think it might be more for the sort of aristocrat hobbits here, like the sort of intermingling between them. I mean, I guess the sort of...
Yeah, they're the great
plebeian hobbits are going to be more mixed.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Appendix D calendars. Not much to say here, apart from the fact that I think it's awesome that October is called Winterfell. When you live in England, I think it's very easy to think of October as Winterfell. Like, they don't celebrate Independence Day or something big and highfalutin. Like, the Shire folk don't commemorate March 25th or September 22nd. But on some random date, they tend to all go into a field and have a massive party, and no one can quite remember why. Like, and there's all these, like, myths around why it's that particular date. And then randomly in Buckland, they blow the horn of the Mark on a random date in November. It's just like, the hobbits are so relaxed and cool, aren't they? Like, they do all this fun stuff. They're not really quite sure why, but hey, we're going to have some barbecue.
It kind of makes me wonder, like, how Frodo even kept track of the date to know that it was a year ago to the day when he got stabbed on Weathertop. Like, how do you remember?
Oh, no, I know. Date is. They don't sort of link up the date with some specific big World War event, because
that's not really what I meant. What I meant is, how does he, like, when they were on their journey and traveling and everything, they were, like, conscious of the date while they were doing all this stuff? It just seems like so much that happened, you wouldn't even remember, like, what day was that? I don't know.
But, I mean, you go to Moria, you're not
Tolkien kept track, so his characters did too.
And then conveniently, whenever you wake up after being in a sort of Morgul-infested coma, there's someone handy like Am to say, yeah, you're right, it's 32 days since you passed out, kind of thing. Like, Tolkien's very good at conveniently dropping in Maiar, who can just give you a pinpoint specific stuff. Oh, dear. Basil.
You think is that why the goblins in Moria had the Balrog, just to tell them what the date was?
Absolutely. Useful public service that's often overlooked. Anything more on the calendars? Nope. And then we get to... No. I'm going to be absolutely thrilled if someone has something to say about Appendix E pronunciation and spelling.
It was kind of strange to me. All the C's are supposed to be pronounced as K. It was weird. I never thought that.
Well, I was fine with, like, Celeborn, but I'd always thought that Círdan rather than Círdan.
Exactly. Exactly, me too.
Well, I just love the fact that he tells you how to pronounce absolutely everything, whereas, you know, like, I say Brienne, and Vic says Brienne, and some people say, you know, there's all sorts of names in A Song of Ice and Fire where there's different things.
Peter and Petire.
Yeah, and then you...
Catelyn,
Caitlin, you know.
Ser.
What?
I mean,
Sir or Sir, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I like the fact that with Tolkien, again, it's OCD. Like, everything is totally locked down. There is a wrong and a right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so well sort of thought out, or at least so detailed, that, I mean, I was watching the extended materials for the Hobbit movie, the first one, and when they, like, have, like, an orc character, they have, like, a language coach next to him, like, telling him the pronunciation of these words. It's kind of silly, actually, like... okay, this is how you pronounce this in the black speech, and like super serious about it.
Yeah.
I guess it's enough to make a living for someone.
When they're making Hobbit movies.
Okay, and then finally we get into Appendix F, which is the language and peoples of the Third Age. This is like this one anecdote which I thought was really cool, that the hobbits don't have formal and informal forms. So apparently one of the reasons the Gondorians thought them really strange is that, the equivalent would be Pippin going up to people and calling them mate in sort of very informal terms rather than very formally. But it was just really funny, like, how far Tolkien took it about how he had tried to translate the languages and how you suddenly realize that Meriadoc isn't really Merry's name. He has this other name, and the short form of that is equivalent to Merry, so then Tolkien has made up Meriadoc as a translation. It's sort of weird in a way, because you're really kind of, by this point, so involved with the characters, and you suddenly realize that their names aren't anything... Like, Peregrine Took's surname's actually spelled T-U with a accent K. It's just kind of... It threw me off a little bit, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost like Tolkien finished the book and he's like, you think you knew what was going on? Well, look at this. And then you're like, you had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, wow, this is like really meta, and it's like Valkyrie should be doing a PhD on this kind of stuff. It's like deep.
I think in the, I think it was in one of the other books I read, Unfinished Tales maybe, Christopher Tolkien was saying that his father really regretted promising, I guess in the first edition of, Fellowship of the Ring? He promised an Appendices to come, and he really regretted it because he said, like, even for him, what he wrote wasn't everything he wanted to say. It was like a part of it. And he said the people like him, it's not going to satisfy, and then other people, it's not going to satisfy because they don't care about it. It's a bunch of useless information.
Yeah, he thought it wasn't enough. It's like 300 pages of a 500-page book.
Yeah. But to me, the balance is right, because there's enough geeky detail, but it's not overwhelming. It whets your appetite for something bigger, but it just leaves you with such respect. I mean, that to me is the big takeaway. There's some cool characters, some cool stories, but it just leaves you with such respect.
Yeah.
I love the appendices up to the point where I hit the pronunciation part, and that was like a stone wall. I didn't get past that.
Fair enough.
I think I
just skipped that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how the George R. R. Martin route for this. I mean, he's always been like, yeah, you can pronounce the names however you like. I don't give a shit. I'm not going to figure it out. Do what you will.
I think these things are just symptomatic, though. Like, I don't care about, like, all the pronunciations being locked down, but the fact that all that is locked down means that I know I'm never going to fall into a time trap or something that hasn't been figured out in the wider story. And with George R. R. Martin, the fact that he's lax about all these little things makes me really worry about whether there's a clear big plan for the next two books. And so it's just symptomatic of something wider, maybe.
Yeah, it's scary that it could end up being like Lost.
Or like Wheel of Time or something that just goes on and just, because, I've devoted so much of my free time to this. It's going to be like, I feel like I'm dating an elfish woman at this point. I've waited 200 years and she better fracking put out by the end.
Has anybody listened to the audiobooks by Rob Inglis?
No, are they good? Are they worth listening to?
They're very good. He does a really good job, I think.
Okay.
So how does he do with like the poems and the singing? Does he do that?
It's been a while since I listened to it, but I'm pretty sure he sings them all. Or he doesn't. It's not like it's kind of like he's reading it, but he's reading it really well. I guess I should say he's not trying to make a specific different character voice for every character. But he does a good job. The only thing is they put the concerning hobbits and all that in the prologue is actually at the end of Return of the King, which kind of aggravated me.
Huh.
That's weird. That's part of the book.
That is weird.
I know.
Right, and it's after you hear about hobbits for the entire series, and then they throw it in at the end. Oh, by the way, these creatures you were thinking, here's some more stuff on them.
Yeah, they live in holes.
In the ground.
So I think that brings us finally to the close of our epic reread of Lord of the Rings. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participated, and also all the comments we've had on the forums. It's been really encouraging that people have enjoyed it. I certainly have. I won't be participating. There's going to be a huge reread of the Silmarillion starting up soon, so you can look out for that. I'll be reading along with that at home, as they say in England. But Until then, it's been a pleasure, and thanks everyone for participating. So thanks to Shane, Amanda, Peter, Nadia, and Whiteraven. So that's it. I kind of feel like I want to hear a wolf howl now. I'm just used to people like howling with me.
I'll howl.
No.
I'm sure Peter will be happy to reply.
And there's like nothing.
This is the wrong place for it. This should be like a fellowship howl or something. Let's sing in Elvish.
Then the road goes ever on, down from the door where it begun. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing with eager feet, till I join some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say.
We have come now to the end. White shores are calling. You and I will meet again, and you'll be here in my arms, just sleeping. What can you see?
That was awesome.
It was great.
See what I mean, guys? We shouldn't have done that.
It's too late, man. Can't shut it down now. It's on 2 recordings.
Brilliant.
Good work, Shane. I was just kidding. I swear. Shane, are you gonna be like cringing if you re-listen and you hear that part? You're like, what was I thinking?
No, that's the only reason I re-listen to this stuff is so I can hear me.
Oh.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
The Rock.
Yeah, that was just a joke about my name, which is not actually my name.
What?
You're so dwarfish. Yeah, I have a secret name that none of us know.
Bunch of secret names.
It's not a secret name once you sign into a Google Doc with your real name.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
The whole premise of the movie is that they need a fast bowler or they need a big ball pitcher or something, and they decide they want a fast bowler and go to India. And anyone who's ever watched cricket should know that fast bowlers don't come from India, they come from Pakistan.
This is so No, but that's like,
Nadia is offended.
as a neutral but great fan of cricket, that is actually factually true.
What's
Yes, I mean, how many fast bowlers has India produced in the last few decades?
one, and he's in that movie. That's why it was such a big deal, I'm sure.
Do you know the whole reason why Pakistan gets like the fastest fast bowlers is because nobody can afford to buy an actual cricket ball. What they do is like take like a really, really cheap tennis ball and cover it up with insulation tape. And then they bowl with that, and then you can get like really, really fast with that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the thing. Nobody plays with an actual cricket ball when they play in the streets.
I feel this conversation is not of interest to like 75% of people on this call.
Yeah, but it's like, this is very emotional for me because like all of us just ignored.
Hey guys, I'm actually in a wiffle ball league, so you should all check that out.
Wiffle ball. Does that even exist?
Yeah, it's a sport.
Yeah. It's
I've
the
never
ball
heard of
with the plastic hole. It's the plastic ball with the holes in it.
I've never heard of leagues for it.
Well, I'm in one. They exist. I can throw a wiffle ball about 75, 80 miles an hour.
I feel this is sort of like an urban legend. Photos or it didn't happen.
Yeah. If football gets thrown,
I think there's YouTube. You can go on YouTube and check it out.
Yeah, let me...
Sorry, Nadia. Can't use it.
You all play in driveways?
No, we actually have a field.
Okay.
Okay, let me just record, let me just do one sentence to placate Nadia to insert Nzioshe. Statement of fact, public service announcement. Pakistan has provided the world with by far the most and best fast bowlers in cricketing history. End of public service announcement. Are you happy now, Nadia?
Thank you, Bina.
We just entered a correction onto the public record on your behalf. Vassals of Kingsgrave, correcting justice.
Thank you for that.
Peter, how do you feel about that? Not like dress?
Sports where you hit the ball and...
Peter's idea of sports is wrestling bears.
Peter doesn't wrestle bears. He gets scared by them, and then Kyle comes along, takes a gun out of his Ziploc bag, and shoots them.
And sweeps me up in his arms.
Oh dear. It's kind of weird how all our creepy fixations on this podcast center around Kyle, like Nadia stalking him and Peter being rescued by him. It's never Amin or Ashley, it's always Kyle.
I actually had a dream last night about fighting with tigers. I tried to drown them in a trough or something, but no Kyle though.
So what happened?
Do you always dream about wild animals?
Not always, sometimes.
90% of the time.
Well, I probably dream about them every night, but I just don't remember it. Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
If you look up wiffle ball on YouTube, there'll be plenty of videos you can see what it is.
In the event of a zombie apocalypse, would the wiffle bat be a good weapon?
Absolutely not.
But a cricket bat would be freaking awesome.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
Ooh, there was a safety controversy in spring 2011, according to Wikipedia. Let me scroll down. The government of New York State proclaimed that wiffle ball was unsafe and a significant risk of injury for children.
What?
Probably because they're playing in the middle of the road.
According to new legislation introduced in New York State, to survive classic schoolyard games like wiffle ball and capture the flag is to cheat death.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
Alright, I'm going to download the software and figure out how to record and edit one because I want to do my Conan the Barbarian where you watch the movie.
Commentary, yeah, we should do that.
Which one? Like the original or the one that was just...
They don't even... Get off the call, dude.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
You should do a VOK on the books, actually.
Yeah.
I would read those. I've never read them. Are they good?
They're really good, I think. They're a lot different. Conan's a lot different in the books than he is in the movie. But he's they're equally cool.
They're
Arnold,
equally fucked up and cool, and nihilistic and weird. But yeah.
The author's suicide note, it was pretty good. I bet you check out the books too.
Yeah,
Robert E. Howard is a very interesting guy. But there's actually a lot of... what tripped me out about reading the books was how they were... I had preconceived notions because they were all from the pulp magazines of the 20s. So I kind of had this idea of them being kind of pulpy and not that good. And it was really a lot of philosophical stuff and a lot of... I don't know, it was real high quality, a lot of high quality.
Well, there's a lot of Nietzschean philosophy, right? I mean, it's deep.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka! I liked Bina's impression of Brienne on the This Dance episode. Have you seen my sister? Right.
Oh, that is weird. It's like a Finnish guy doing an impression of an English girl doing an impression of a fictional... Oh, dear.
Kaka! Rejoice, Kaka!
I have to just pause momentarily for anyone involved in the whole petty Wolfcast, Dragoncast, Krakencast rivalry. Someone's just posted a comment on the last Wolfcast saying, another great podcast by Team Wolves. I listened to the Dragoncast and the other one, I forgot the name. Oh, I love this Kraken.
Also, I think Krakencast is probably the most rational discussion of Game of Thrones.
And it gets the most listeners because it's first up too. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other one, whatever they're called.
Rational. That's no fun.
I listen to
I
all
feel
of
bad
them
because I don't
have the show.
listen to the Krakencast.
Sorry?
I feel bad because I don't listen to the Krakencast. I just don't have enough time.
Yeah,
It's funny, I listen to Kraken and Wolf, but I don't listen to Dragon, which makes me feel bad.
I've stopped feeling bad because I don't listen to any of them. I just listen to Podcast of Ice and Fire now.
there is a lot of content in fairness. I don't think anyone can listen to all of it. It's just ridiculous.
I do.
Really?
I don't have the show.
See,
You don't watch the show?
There are ways to get the show.
I know, but I'm not that type.
Me neither.
Well,
I feel really
evil.
stupid. I feel like everyone else is doing that and I don't. I wait patiently until it's on TV and I pay my $100 a month, and I just think...
Well, I have it on TV, but that would be like 14 hours later, so I go the other route.
So you are paying for it.
Even a week I'd wait, but in my case, it's like 7 months. Okay, that's out of the question for me. I do not have that kind of patience.
It's okay. I think everyone in Krakencast is probably acquiring it from the same method. Since isn't their pay TV super expensive?
Yeah, I think they went over that on the first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get really nervous because I just think if someone wants to be really mean to the OK, like there's some pretty open advocacy of piracy. But anyway, now we're getting really off topic.
Caca! Rejoice, caca!
I like the idea that he's just self-aware enough to say, look, you know, this isn't my strength. I have many strengths, so fuck it. There's these two geeks and let them handle it. But it's kind of, I prefer the Tolkien. Maybe I'm OCD. I prefer the world where even if I don't know all about it, I know it's all there and planned out. It gives me such comfort as a reader that there are no gaps like that.
Yes. I mean,
it's the most frustrating thing about George. I love George R. R. Martin's work, but that just really winds me up. Something.
that and carrying around all the currency.
See, the thing is, like, Tolkien, you, as a professor of Old English, don't get into economics because I don't know about this shit, so fuck it. Whereas George R. R. Martin, I just know that when the next book comes out and the Iron Bank's going to be massive, that I'm just going to have, like, you know, brain hemorrhage. But, you know, until then, it's been great podcasting with you. Appendices, family tricky. I'm just going to have to divorce myself from the world of Ice and Fire at that point.
Caca! Rejoice, caca!
Okay, marrying cousins is not incest, okay? I've been arguing about that on the phone recently.
Big
Okay, it's just my modern values. Okay, in some part of the world, it is considered incest now, but still, in a lot of places, it's not. Marrying your cousins, even marrying your first cousin, is fine.
Well, I mean, in Jane Eyre, she marries or is, you know, gonna marry her first cousin, St. John Rivers. Yeah. It's much more common in literature, and that's not that long ago, like in the 1800s. Lots of English literature is full of it, but yeah.
Do you want the American answer? It's wrong because we say it's wrong.
But I'm sure it's not illegal in places like, I'm sure there's parts of Texas and places where it's not illegal.
You're supposed to say West Virginia. That's the place.
Yeah.
But Shane's on the call is much more fun.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay, in my part of the world, marrying cousins is not incest, okay? So, but marrying like uncles and aunts is, so.
Let's just say we don't marry our cousins in Texas. Leave it at that.
You don't go that far out there, huh? You're just more sister-wife type people?
I just don't have enough money for sister-wives.
Oh, damn.
Caca! Rejoice, caca!